In the quiet of a suburban home, a child stood frozen in the doorway, blood on the floor, voices swallowed by the dark. For decades, her silence protected a story no one dared to tell, until now. The story begins in silence. Not the calm silence of a peaceful home, but the suffocating quiet that follows violence. It was late December, a time when most families were preparing for celebration, when laughter and anticipation usually filled kitchens and living rooms. But for 12-year-old Bella, Christmas became a season forever marked by trauma. Her world collapsed not under the weight of presents and lights, but under the crack of a violent outburst, the sound of flesh against bone, and the terrifying sight of her mother lashing out at the man who had raised her as his own. That man, Adam Cummings, her stepfather, was rushed to the hospital, fighting for his life. Her mother, Laura Daniels, was taken away in handcuffs, charged with attempted murder. And Bella, their daughter, their witness, their only child together in that fractured home, was left standing in the wreckage of everything she knew. What happens to a child when the people they depend on become the source of their deepest fear? How do you rebuild trust when safety is torn away in an instant? These questions lie at the heart of Bella's story, a case that reveals not only the tragedy of domestic violence, but also the quiet resilience of a girl who, for a time, could not speak a single word about what she had seen. On Christmas Eve, as families across the country wrapped presents and prepared feasts, Bella was placed into emergency foster care. For the adults around her, the logistics were hurried, social workers making frantic phone calls, foster carers rushing to prepare a room, neighbors whispering about flashing lights outside the Daniels home. For Bella, it was the unraveling of her entire childhood. The violence was not sudden in origin. Laura Daniels and Adam Cummings had been together since Bella was a toddler. Their relationship, always volatile, was marked by drunken fights, shouting matches that spilled out into the garden, and a revolving door of police visits. Yet despite the chaos, Bella had always been shielded. Social workers noted she was well-kept, articulate, clearly loved by her mother, and, despite Adam's drinking, never harmed by him. To the outside world, she was the picture of resilience, the child who thrived despite the storms around her. But in December, the storms became too fierce. Adam, who had been attending AA meetings, relapsed. Alcohol, as so often, became the accelerant of destruction. On that night, violence erupted so suddenly and so ferociously that it ended with Adam unconscious in intensive care and Laura facing prison. And Bella, wide-eyed and frozen in terror, had seen everything. When police officers arrived, she didn't scream, didn't cry, didn't even speak. Witnesses later described her as eerily calm, standing in the corner, clutching a soft toy as paramedics lifted her stepfather's broken body onto a stretcher. That silence, that refusal to speak, became the defining element of her story. It was not the silence of ignorance, but the silence of protection, of trauma, of unbearable truth. In the days that followed, she was moved between temporary carers, each one trying gently to coax her into conversation. Each one met with the same mute stare. Social workers debated what to do. Should she be placed with her grandparents? No. Bella refused outright, terrified of her grandfather for reasons she would not explain. Should she stay with emergency carers? They couldn't manage the weight of her silence and the unpredictability of her grief. And so, on Christmas Eve, she arrived at the Watson household, strangers, yet her only refuge. Imagine for a moment being 12 years old. Imagine being driven in the back of a car, clutching a backpack filled with hastily gathered belongings, past houses glowing with festive lights, into a stranger's home where laughter and family chatter feel alien, even dangerous. Imagine knowing your stepfather may die, your mother may never come home, and you are the only one who knows exactly what happened. But you cannot, or will not, say a word. Bella's silence was not emptiness. It was heavy, thick with meaning. In psychology, mutism following trauma is often described as a defense mechanism, the mind's way of protecting itself from reliving unbearable memories. For Bella, it also seemed to serve another purpose, shielding her mother. Was Laura guilty of attempted murder, or had she struck Adam in self-defense? After years of abuse, Bella's voice could have been the deciding factor. But she would not give it. Not to police, not to social workers, not even to the foster family who welcomed her with warmth. In the Watson home, Christmas morning came quietly. While other children tore open presents with giddy laughter, Bella sat neatly on the rug, opening her gifts one by one, offering no more than a polite nod. She did not smile. She did not cry. She did not speak. The only sound she made was the faint scrape of wrapping paper, folded carefully into piles, as if order could somehow restore her fractured world. This was how Bella entered the care system. A child who carried the unbearable weight of witness, who lived in silence, and who became known, in whispered tones among professionals, as the silent witness. What unfolded in the weeks and months after her arrival would test the patience of her carers, the skill of social workers, and the determination of the justice system. It would also uncover family secrets that cast long shadows over her refusal to speak. This is not just the story of a violent crime. It is the story of a child caught between loyalty and truth, between love for her mother and the horror of what she saw. It is the story of silence, and what happens when that silence begins to crack. When Bella first stepped across the threshold of her foster home, she didn't meet anyone's eyes. Her hood stayed up, her backpack gripped so tightly her knuckles whitened. The living room was warm and glowing with fairy lights, but she didn't look at the tree, didn't glance at the gifts beneath it, didn't acknowledge the voices welcoming her. She slid silently onto the sofa beside the young social worker who had driven her, like a shadow clinging to the only familiar shape in the room. It was not hostility. It was fear. Fear that if she let her guard down, even for a second, something inside her would break. Children in crisis often lash out, shout, cry, demand answers. Bella did none of those things. Her defense was retreat, a shell built around silence. Her foster carer offered her tea. The girl glanced up briefly, then down again, waiting for the social worker's nod before giving the smallest signal of agreement. Even that was wordless. The mug was placed gently into her hands, and she cradled it without drinking. It was enough for now just to hold something warm. For the adults in the room, the scene was heartbreaking. Here was a child who should have been upstairs laying out stockings for Father Christmas, or watching a film in her pajamas, giggling at the silliness of elves and reindeer. Instead, she was the only witness to a brutal act of violence, ripped from her home, told she might never see her parents again, and deposited into the care of strangers. What no one could yet know was how deep that silence would run. For weeks, she would not speak more than a handful of words. She communicated through nods, shrugs, and the occasional ghost of a smile. The rest of the time, she drifted between rooms like a phantom, present but unreachable. Psychologists have a term for this trauma-induced mutism. It is not the same as being unable to speak. Bella's voice still worked. She whispered answers to herself when she thought no one was listening. She mouthed words when reading along in books. But when it came to conversation, to questions about her past, she locked it away. Trauma can freeze a child's voice, as if their very survival depends on keeping the truth buried. And the truth, in Bella's case, was complex. Neighbors knew the couple's history. The shouting, the fights, the nights when police cars parked outside the house. Adam's alcoholism was no secret, nor were Laura's attempts to hold the family together. Yet no one had imagined it would end like this. A man in intensive care, a woman in prison, and a girl who would not or could not tell the story. The police wanted answers. Prosecutors needed a clear account. Was Laura Daniels a victim who lashed out after years of abuse? Or was she the aggressor, driven by rage, alcohol, or desperation? Bella's testimony could unlock the case. But every time she was asked, her lips pressed tighter, her eyes fell to the floor, and her silence filled the room like fog. Her foster carers, too, struggled with the quiet. They were used to children arriving in chaos, screaming, swearing, breaking things, crying until they collapsed. Those emotions, raw and loud, could be managed. But silence was different. Silence meant guesswork. Silence meant fear of what might be festering inside. At night, Bella would curl around her soft toy, a strange, gremlin-like creature she refused to let go of, and stare at the ceiling for hours. Sometimes her foster mother tiptoed in to check, only to find those wide blue eyes open, unblinking. Other times, Bella slept so deeply she seemed unreachable, as if her body had finally collapsed under the weight of exhaustion. Christmas morning came. Downstairs, her foster family exchanged gifts, laughter spilling across the room. Bella joined, sitting cross-legged near the tree, carefully unwrapping the presents that had been bought for her at the last minute. Pajamas, a soft toy rabbit, a fluffy dressing gown, a book. She opened each one politely, placed it in a neat pile, and said nothing. The most striking moment came later that day, when she finally spoke. It wasn't an answer to a question, or a confession about what she'd seen. It was a single, ordinary phrase. As her foster brother Tyler settled onto the rug with a stack of DVDs, he asked if she wanted to watch Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows. For the first time since arriving, Bella's lips parted. Her voice was soft, high-pitched, almost tentative. Yes, please. 2 words. But for her carers, it was like a breakthrough. Proof that beneath the silence, Bella was still there. A child, not a ghost. From that moment, a fragile connection began to form. Tyler, just a few years older, became her bridge back to the world of children. He treated her not as a case, not as a fragile porcelain figure, but as a peer. He joked, teased, explained the plots of films, showed her his video games. He didn't ask about the violence. He didn't mention her parents. And so, in his presence, Bella began to lower her guard. Still, the silence remained whenever adults probed too deeply. Her social worker, young and eager, tried to coax her into conversation. Bella responded with nods. Her foster parents gently encouraged her to share feelings. She stared at her lap. Police officers, in carefully arranged interviews, asked about the night of the attack. Bella's lips pressed into a thin, stubborn line. The child had drawn a line in the sand. She would not betray her mother. Not with words. Not with stories. Not with truth. For professionals, it raised agonizing questions. Was her silence loyalty, fear, denial, or simply trauma too great to articulate? Each theory carried weight. Each left Bella stranded in limbo. A witness who refused to witness. A daughter torn between justice and love. Meanwhile, Adam Cummings remained in hospital, his condition uncertain. Every day, doctors monitored him. Every day, the threat of death loomed. And every day, Bella remained silent, knowing her words could determine whether her mother spent years behind bars. The legal system does not wait for children to heal. Investigators pressed forward, gathering evidence from neighbors, medical staff, forensic teams. But without Bella's testimony, the case against Laura Daniels was fragile. Prosecutors worried it would collapse. Defense lawyers pointed to Adam's history of violence, of drunken outbursts, of arguments that spiraled into chaos. Maybe, they suggested, Laura had finally snapped, defending herself against another assault. The truth, the complete truth, remained locked inside a 12-year-old girl. As weeks passed, Bella's foster family adjusted. They grew used to her quiet presence, the way she drifted from room to room, always clutching her gremlin toy, always keeping a slight distance. The other children in the household accepted her silence too, filling the gaps with chatter, drawing her into games without expecting replies. Slowly, subtly, Bella became part of the fabric of the home. Still fragile, but no longer an outsider. Yet at night, when the house grew still, her silence weighed heavier. Her foster mother often lay awake, wondering what images haunted Bella's mind, what screams or crashes echoed in her memory. She wondered if the girl replayed the moment of violence again and again, or if she buried it so deep it only surfaced in restless dreams. This was the paradox of Bella's silence. By refusing to speak, she kept the world from knowing her pain, but she also trapped herself inside it. And so, the girl who had seen too much became known not for what she revealed, but for what she withheld. A silent witness to violence. a child torn between love and truth. Her story was only just beginning. The days immediately after Christmas were perhaps the hardest. For most families, the week between Christmas and New Year is a blur of leftovers, family visits, and laughter that lingers past midnight. For Bella, it was a blur of uncertainty. Each morning, she padded quietly downstairs, hair unbrushed, still wrapped in the fluffy gown her carers had bought her, and sat at the table without a word. She ate little. She drank even less. Her silence was not just emotional, it was physical, too. Meals became rituals of patience, her foster family waiting, encouraging, but never pushing. The Watsons had seen many children arrive at their door in crisis. Some were defiant, determined to test boundaries from the start. Others were terrified, clinging to anything familiar. But Bella was different. She didn't cling, didn't fight, didn't cry. She simply existed, moving like a ghost from room to room, quiet and self-contained. And yet, she was observant. Her wide eyes followed every interaction. The way her foster mother laughed at her husband's jokes. The way Tyler flopped across the sofa with teenage nonchalance. The way the grandchildren bickered, then reconciled with giggles. Bella didn't join in, but she watched, absorbing every detail. It was as if she were trying to relearn what a safe family looked like. One afternoon, a few days after her arrival, her foster mother found her in the living room, sitting cross-legged on the rug with a notebook open in her lap. She wasn't writing. She was just staring at the page, pencil hovering above it. When asked gently what she was doing, Bella shrugged. Then, in a barely audible whisper, she muttered, "Nothing." It was only the third word she had spoken since arriving. That tiny fragment was enough to raise hope. Perhaps her carers thought she was edging toward expression, if not through speech, then through writing. But when offered colored pens and encouraged to draw, Bella pushed them away. The notebook was hers and hers alone. What was inside, if she ever chose to write, would remain a secret. Meanwhile, outside the foster home, the case pressed forward. The hospital reported that Adam Cummings remained in a coma, his condition critical. Surgeons had relieved pressure on his skull after the blow, but the prognosis was uncertain. He might never wake. If he did, there was no guarantee he would remember what had happened. This uncertainty placed enormous weight on Bella. Without her testimony, prosecutors struggled to build a clear narrative. Neighbors provided accounts of the couple's history, the shouting, the drinking, the fights that spilled into the garden. But none had seen the attack itself. Bella had. She was the only eyewitness. Social workers debated whether she was protecting her mother or simply frozen by trauma. One suggested that Bella's mutism was a deliberate act of loyalty, a refusal to condemn the woman she still loved. Another believed it was shock, the mind's way of shielding itself from images too horrific to recall. Both could be true. Children in Bella's situation often lived in a complicated space, where love and fear coexisted, tangled so tightly they became inseparable. The legal team pressed for another interview. A quiet room was prepared, filled with soft toys and coloring books, designed to make Bella feel safe. A police officer trained in child protection sat across from her, asking gentle, open-ended questions. Bella stared at the floor, hands folded in her lap, lips pressed tight. When asked if she remembered what happened the night her stepfather was hurt, she shook her head. When asked if she wanted to talk about her mom, she whispered one word, "No." The interview ended in frustration. Officials left with no new information. Bella returned to her foster home, her silence intact. But silence does not mean absence. In the small details of daily life, Bella revealed pieces of herself. She adored Harry Potter, spending hours curled in a chair with the thick volumes balanced on her knees. She hummed softly under her breath when she thought no one was listening, fragments of tunes from films or radio jingles. She lined her soft toys carefully along her bed, a regiment of silent companions who stood guard while she slept. Her foster family noticed patterns. She flinched at sudden loud noises, a door slamming, a pan dropped in the kitchen. She stiffened whenever men entered the room too quickly, even if it was only Mike, her foster father. And she avoided mirrors, turning her face away whenever she passed one, as though unable to confront her own reflection. These were the invisible scars of violence. Scars no doctor could stitch, no bandage could cover. Scars that would take months, even years, to heal. One evening, as the family sat together watching television, Bella suddenly rose from the sofa and disappeared upstairs. When her foster mother checked on her later, she found Bella curled on the bed, face buried in her pillow, shoulders shaking silently. She wasn't crying out loud, but the trembling gave her away. For the first time, she allowed herself to grieve. She didn't speak, but she let someone sit beside her, hand resting gently on her back. That, in itself, was a breakthrough. For children like Bella, progress is measured not in leaps but in inches. A nod instead of silence. A whispered word instead of refusal. A moment of trust instead of retreat. Each tiny step mattered. Each was a crack in the wall she had built around herself. But the clock was ticking. Prosecutors couldn't wait forever. The longer Bella remained silent, the harder it became to build a case against Laura Daniels. And as the new year approached, whispers began to circulate. What if Bella never spoke at all? Her foster carers knew better than to push. Forcing a child to talk before they were ready could do more harm than good. Instead, they offered stability, warm meals, safe routines, gentle encouragement. They hoped that in time, Bella would find her voice again. And slowly she did. Not in the interrogation rooms, not with the social workers, but in the quiet moments of ordinary life. Playing board games with Tyler, she giggled once. A small, startled laugh that escaped before she could stop it. Watching a film, she whispered a line along with the characters. At bedtime, she whispered goodnight, so softly it was almost inaudible. These fragments, fragile and fleeting, were proof that her silence was not permanent. Still, the question lingered. Would she ever speak about what mattered most? The violence she had seen remained unspoken, locked deep inside her. And until she chose to unlock it, her mother's fate, and perhaps her own, hung in the balance. New Year's Eve arrived with none of the usual anticipation. Fireworks echoed faintly outside, but inside the Watson home the atmosphere was subdued. Families across the neighborhood toasted at midnight, but Bella sat quietly by the window, knees pulled up to her chest, watching the bursts of color in the sky. She didn't cheer. She didn't clap. She didn't even flinch at the bangs. She simply stared, her expression unreadable. Her foster mother sat beside her, offering a blanket. "New year, new start," she said softly. Bella didn't reply, but she allowed the blanket to be draped over her shoulders. That was enough. For a child in her situation, the calendar meant little. The change from December to January didn't erase the past, didn't heal the wounds, didn't bring her parents back. If anything, the new year marked the beginning of something darker. The legal battle that would determine whether her mother was guilty of attempted murder, and whether Bella herself would be forced to take the stand. The social worker, Sophie, visited more frequently in those early weeks of January. Young, enthusiastic, and determined, she tried to connect with Bella through games, art, and gentle questions. But Bella remained cautious. She would nod politely, sometimes write a word or two on paper, but she would not speak about the night that had changed everything. It became clear that Bella trusted only a select few. Tyler, her foster brother, was one of them. He treated her as if she were just another kid, not a fragile witness. When he teased her about her choice of pajamas or challenged her to a video game, she responded with tiny smiles, even chuckles. Around him, she seemed to breathe a little easier. Her foster mother noticed it too. "It's like he's the key," she confided to Sophie one afternoon. "She won't open the door for us, but with him, you can see the lock turning." And yet, the silence persisted when it mattered most. In meetings with professionals, Bella's voice vanished. She retreated into herself, refusing to betray either parent. The adults debated endlessly. Was she shielding her mother, or was the trauma simply too deep? The answer, perhaps, lay in loyalty. Despite everything, Bella still loved Laura. Love doesn't disappear because of violence. For children, even those who witness terrible things, attachment to a parent can remain unbreakable. To speak against her mother might have felt like tearing out her own heart. But the law had no patience for silence. As the weeks dragged on, pressure mounted. Prosecutors needed testimony. Defense lawyers prepared arguments. Social services worried about Bella's long-term well-being. And all the while, Adam Cummings remained in the hospital, his survival uncertain. The Watson household became a place of fragile routine. Bella began attending school again, though only part-time. She sat quietly in the classroom, completing assignments with neat handwriting but rarely speaking. Teachers reported that she was polite, intelligent, but distant. Classmates tried to include her, but Bella kept to herself. She was a girl carrying secrets too heavy for playground chatter. At home, the atmosphere was warmer. Evenings were spent watching films, playing board games, or reading together. Bella rarely spoke, but she listened. She absorbed the rhythms of family life, the gentle teasing, the shared meals, the laughter that followed small mishaps. Slowly, she began to mimic it. One night, when Tyler spilled juice across the table, Bella let out a quiet giggle. It was fleeting, but it was real. Her carers exchanged glances of relief. Progress came in small increments. A whispered good night, a nod when asked about breakfast, a soft thank you when handed a hot chocolate. These moments, tiny as they were, felt monumental. They were signs that Bella's silence was not absolute, that she was beginning to trust again. Still, the shadows lingered. At night, she sometimes woke in terror, clutching her toy gremlin tightly, eyes wide as though she had seen something in the dark. When asked if she had nightmares, she shook her head violently. Denial was her shield. Her foster mother worried constantly. "She's holding it all in," she confided to Mike one evening. "One day it's going to come out, and I don't know how she'll cope." And then, in mid-January, the phone rang. It was news from the hospital. Adam Cummings had opened his eyes. The call sent ripples through everyone involved. After weeks in a coma, Adam had regained consciousness. His condition remained critical, but he was awake, able to communicate. For prosecutors, it was a turning point. If Adam could recount what happened, they might not need Bella's testimony. For Bella, it was a storm on the horizon. What would her stepfather say? Would he accuse Laura? Would he blame her? Would he confirm what Bella had seen, or twist it into something else? Social workers treaded carefully. Bella was told only that Adam was awake, nothing more. Her reaction was muted. She nodded once, then retreated to her room. Behind the closed door, she sat on her bed, hugging her toy, staring at the wall. No tears, no words, just silence. Days later, Adam gave his first statement. He remembered Fragments, the argument, the drinking, the blow that left him collapsing. But his recollection was hazy. Alcohol clouded the details. He admitted that he had been drunk, that he might have provoked the fight, but he insisted that Laura had struck him harder than she ever had before. Whether it was self-defense or aggression, he couldn't say. The ambiguity left prosecutors frustrated. Adam's testimony helped, but it wasn't enough. Bella remained the only clear eyewitness, and so the pressure on her intensified. Her foster family watched anxiously as professionals circled. Meetings were scheduled. Plans were made. Psychologists were brought in, hoping to unlock Bella's silence through therapy. Bella attended the sessions politely, but she said little. She would color pictures, answer yes or no questions with nods, but when asked about the night of the attack, she shut down. It was clear that she was not ready. Forcing her could cause irreparable harm. Yet the legal machine continued to grind forward. One evening, as the family gathered for dinner, Bella surprised everyone. She set down her fork, looked at Tyler, and asked softly, "Do you think Dobby dies?" She was halfway through the deathly hallows and wanted reassurance. The table fell silent. It was the longest sentence she had spoken since arriving. Tyler grinned, trying not to make a big deal of it. "You'll have to read and see," he said. That moment captured the paradox of Bella's silence. She could speak when she chose about things that felt safe. Books, films, games, these were neutral ground. But the night of the violence remained locked away, a forbidden subject. And so, as January turned to February, Bella remained what she had been from the start. A child caught in silence. A witness who would not speak. A daughter torn between loyalty and truth. Her foster family could only wait, offering patience, stability, and love, hoping that in time, Bella would find her voice, and with it, the strength to confront the shadows of her past. February arrived with a biting cold. Frost clung to the edges of windows, pavements glittered with ice, and the air carried that raw chill that makes every breath visible. In the Watson household, life moved with cautious rhythm. Meals at the table, evenings with films, the quiet rustle of pages turning as Bella devoured another Harry Potter book. On the surface, it looked like normal family life. But underneath, tension simmered. The news that Adam Cummings had awakened brought little relief. His memory was patchy, his testimony uncertain. He admitted to drinking heavily that night, admitted to shouting, but could not or would not say with certainty who started the violence or why it had escalated so far. He remembered a blow, then darkness. The rest was fog. For the justice system, it was a half-truth, not a resolution. Prosecutors still looked to Bella. She remained the only clear witness, and still she would not speak. Her foster mother saw the weight in her eyes. Bella was only 12, yet her silence carried the heaviness of someone much older, someone who understood the stakes all too well. Every time the subject of her mother arose, even in passing, her body stiffened, her face shuddered. She was loyal, fiercely so. To speak about that night would mean betraying Laura, and betrayal was something Bella could not contemplate. Her social worker, Sophie, tried new strategies. She brought art supplies, hoping Bella might draw her feelings. She introduced storytelling exercises, inviting Bella to invent characters and write about them instead of herself. Bella listened politely, but her drawings remained abstract. Swirls of color, shapes without meaning. Her stories, when she wrote them, were fragments. A girl in a tower, a creature in the dark, a key with no lock. Clues, perhaps, but never a confession. Therapists described her as selectively mute, a label that didn't quite capture the truth. Bella wasn't mute in the traditional sense. She spoke when she wanted to, about things that felt safe. Books, films, food. But when it came to the violence, her silence was ironclad. Trauma-induced mutism, selective loyalty, whatever the term, the result was the same. She was the silent witness, and nothing could shake her resolve. Meanwhile, the Watson household adjusted around her. Tyler, ever the big brother, pulled her into his world. He showed her how to play video games, explained school gossip, teased her about her love for Dobby the house elf. With him, Bella softened. She whispered jokes, even laughed. Around the adults, she retreated again. It was as if she had drawn two circles. One for peers, one for authority. Inside the first, she allowed herself to exist. Inside the second, she disappeared. Her foster parents were patient. They knew forcing the issue could shatter what fragile trust she had built. Instead, they offered stability. Breakfast waiting in the morning. A warm bed at night. Quiet reassurances that she was safe. Sometimes that was all a child needed. Not answers, not interrogation, just the steady presence of adults who would not leave. But outside that home, the storm grew louder. Prosecutors grew impatient. Police officers made quiet visits, reminding social workers that time was slipping away. The defense team, meanwhile, built their narrative. Laura Daniels, a woman trapped in an abusive relationship who had lashed out in fear. Without Bella's testimony, it was a story that could hold. The question no one dared voice aloud was simple. What if Bella never spoke? One cold evening, as February crept toward Valentine's Day, Bella's foster mother found her sitting at the kitchen table long after everyone else had gone to bed. The house was dark, lit only by the faint glow of the street lamp outside. Bella sat with her notebook open, pencil in hand, staring at the page. "What are you doing up, love?" her foster mother asked softly. Bella looked up, startled, then quickly shut the notebook. "Nothing," she whispered. It was the same answer as before, but this time, there was a flicker of defiance in her eyes. She wasn't just hiding her words. She was protecting them. Whatever she had written in that notebook, it was hers alone. The foster mother didn't press. She simply placed a mug of warm milk beside her and kissed the top of her head. "All right," she said gently. "Nothing it is." Moments like these defined Bella's early months in care. Silence on the surface, but under it, a storm of thoughts too heavy to share. Meanwhile, Adam Cummings began to recover. Slowly, painfully, he regained strength. He was moved from intensive care to a regular ward. He could walk with assistance, speak in full sentences. But his memory of the night remained foggy. He told police he remembered Laura shouting, remembered a struggle, then nothing. His account was riddled with gaps, weakened by alcohol and trauma. Prosecutors pressed him, but he could not provide clarity. For Bella, his recovery was another complication. She had loved him once, perhaps still did. He had been her father in all but name, raising her since she was small. But he was also the man who had filled the house with rage and drink, whose presence had turned birthdays and Christmases into battlegrounds. How could a child reconcile such contradictions? Love tangled with fear, loyalty with betrayal. Silence was the only answer she could manage. At school, teachers grew concerned. Bella was bright, clearly capable, but she avoided eye contact, rarely joined group activities, and spoke only when absolutely necessary. She was polite, never disruptive, but she carried an invisible wall with her. Other children noticed, whispering about the quiet girl. But over time, they grew used to her silence. Her foster mother worried that Bella was vanishing into herself. "She's like a candle flickering in the wind," she confided to Sophie. "One wrong move and she'll go out." Yet even in that fragility, there were glimmers of resilience. One afternoon, while playing a board game with Tyler, Bella laughed so hard she covered her mouth, as though shocked by the sound. Another time, she corrected him on a Harry Potter trivia question, her voice firm, her eyes shining with triumph. These moments reminded everyone that beneath the silence, Bella was still a child. Wounded? Yes, but not broken. The professionals called it progress. The foster family called it hope. But the law cared little for hope. Court dates loomed. Prosecutors prepared for trial. Defense lawyers sharpened their arguments. And Bella remained the pivotal piece on the board, the witness who would not testify. Her foster mother often lay awake at night, listening to the quiet hum of the house, wondering what images haunted Bella's dreams. She knew that silence, left unchecked, could calcify into permanence. She worried about the long-term damage, the trust issues, the fear of intimacy, the inability to express pain. But she also knew that healing could not be rushed. Bella would speak when she was ready, if she was ever ready. And so February passed in a blur of frost and uncertainty. The case edged closer to trial. Adam Cummings recovered slowly, his memory still fractured. Laura Daniels remained in prison, awaiting her fate. And Bella, the silent witness, carried the weight of it all in her small, fragile frame. The silence was her shield. But every shield eventually begins to crack. By the second week of February, Adam Cummings was sitting upright in a hospital chair, his face pale and drawn but alive. The nurses reported he was improving steadily, though his speech was still slow and his memory unreliable. For his doctors, survival was victory enough. For the courts, however, survival meant expectation that he would testify. The prospect unsettled everyone. If Adam claimed Laura had attacked him in cold blood, the case against her would strengthen. If he insisted he had been the aggressor, Laura's defense of self-defense would gain weight. But if his testimony remained foggy, the whole case could collapse. The pressure returned, inevitably, to Bella. She was the one who had seen everything, who had stood in that kitchen when the shouting turned to violence. Her silence was no longer just a personal choice. It was the pivot on which justice turned. Her social worker, Sophie, tried again and again to find a way in. She brought puzzles, encouraged journaling, even sat cross-legged on the carpet to play board games, hoping Bella might open up in a moment of ease. But Bella remained resolute. She would giggle with Tyler, nod politely to her carers, even mutter yes or no when pressed about meals or clothes. But when the conversation edged toward her mother, her stepfather, or that night, the shutters slammed down. Children in care often reveal themselves in fragments, through drawings, through slip-ups in casual conversation, through play. Bella's fragments were telling. She drew small houses, often with broken windows. She sketched animals caged behind bars. Once, she drew a tiny girl standing at the edge of a huge, dark shape that filled the page. When asked what it was, she shrugged and muttered, "Shadow." Her foster mother stared at that drawing long after Bella had wandered off. A shadow. Perhaps that was what Bella lived under. The shadow of that night, the shadow of her mother's arrest, the shadow of truths too heavy to voice. Then came the first request for contact. Laura Daniels, still on remand, wanted to see her daughter. It was her right as a mother, unless deemed unsafe. Social services deliberated carefully. Contact between children and imprisoned parents was always fraught. But in this case, Laura had not been accused of harming Bella directly. Some argued that maintaining the bond could help the girl heal. Others worried it would tighten the silence further, binding Bella to her mother's version of events. In the end, supervised contact was approved. A date was set. The days leading up to it were restless. Bella grew more withdrawn, carrying her soft toy from room to room, clinging to it as if it were armor. She picked at her food, slept fitfully, and stared more often at her notebook, though she rarely wrote in it. Her foster family tiptoed around her, offering comfort without intrusion. On the morning of the visit, Bella dressed carefully, choosing her best clothes. She brushed her hair until it shone, then asked for a mirror. It was unusual. She normally avoided mirrors, turning away from her reflection. Now, she stood in front of it for several minutes, studying herself. Was she trying to look brave for her mother, or simply trying to remember who she was before everything fell apart? The visit took place in a sterile room at the prison, furnished with a table, a few chairs, and a box of toys meant for younger children. Laura entered in standard prison clothing, her hair tied back, her face pale but animated. "Bella," she whispered, rushing forward, arms open. Bella hesitated only a moment before stepping into the embrace. For the first time in weeks, she looked like a child again, folded into her mother's arms, clutching her tightly. The supervisors watched carefully, noting every movement, every word. Laura kissed her daughter's hair, stroked her face, whispered that she loved her, that everything would be all right. Bella said nothing. She sat close, holding Laura's hand, but the silence remained. When the visit ended, Bella left without protest, though her eyes lingered on her mother until the door closed. Back at the foster home, she retreated to her room, shutting the door firmly. For hours, she did not emerge. The foster parents understood. Love does not vanish, even when trust is broken. Bella was torn, caught between the mother she adored and the truth she feared to tell. Meanwhile, whispers about her extended family began to surface. At the beginning, social workers had tried to place Bella with her maternal grandparents. But Bella had refused, hysterical at the very suggestion. She had clung to her bag, shaking her head violently, saying she would rather live with strangers. The reason, at first, was unclear. Her grandmother was described as kind, supportive, often present in Bella's life. But her grandfather, there was something unspoken there. Bella never accused him of harm, but her fear was palpable. She would not go near his house, would not even discuss him. To mention his name was to bring a flicker of panic to her eyes. It was another piece of the puzzle, another layer of silence. What secrets lay hidden in that family? What had Bella seen or felt that made her recoil from her grandfather so strongly? Social services noted it in their files but could not push further without evidence. Bella would not speak, and without her words, nothing could be proven. Back at home, daily life tried to resume. School, homework, meals, bedtime. But the tension never left. Every letter from the court, every phone call from social services, every whisper about trial dates added to the pressure. The adults knew Bella was a child balancing on a knife edge, and any wrong step could send her spiraling. One evening, after supper, Bella surprised them all. She placed her notebook on the table in front of her foster mother. "Don't read," she whispered. "Just keep it safe." It was the longest sentence she had spoken since Christmas. Her foster mother nodded solemnly and tucked the notebook into a drawer. She didn't peek, didn't betray the fragile trust. But she wondered, was it a diary? A confession? A place where Bella had finally written down what she could not say. Whatever it was progress. A sign that Bella was finding her own way to express herself, even if only in secret. But the courts could not build a case on secrets. They needed words spoken aloud, under oath. And as spring approached, the pressure on Bella only grew heavier. The days after Bella's visit with her mother were tense. She moved through the house in silence, shoulders hunched, clutching her toy rabbit more tightly than usual. At meals, she pushed food around her plate without eating. At night, her foster mother heard the faint creak of floorboards as Bella paced her room long after midnight. The visit had given her comfort, but it had also reopened wounds she had tried to keep buried. Then another request came, this time from Adam. Still recovering in hospital, he had asked to see Bella. He told his social worker that he missed her, that she had always been like his own daughter, and that seeing her might help them both heal. For professionals, the request was complicated. Adam was not accused of harming Bella directly, but the memories of his drunken rages lingered in the background. More importantly, Bella herself had not said whether she wanted to see him. When the idea was raised, she froze. Her face went pale, her hands gripped the edge of the table, and she shook her head sharply. "No," she whispered, just one word, but spoken with unmistakable force. Her foster mother reached out gently. "It's okay, love. You don't have to if you don't want to." Bella's eyes filled with tears. She blinked them back quickly, but the message was clear. Seeing her mother had been painful but bearable. Seeing Adam was something else entirely. The thought of it terrified her. The refusal raised new questions for professionals. If Adam had never harmed Bella, why was she so frightened of him? Was her fear rooted only in the violence she had witnessed between him and her mother? Or was there more that she could not or would not reveal? The silence deepened. Meanwhile, the pressure from the legal system grew heavier. The trial date loomed. Prosecutors pressed for Bella's testimony, insisting that her voice was essential. Defense lawyers prepared to argue that without her account, the case was riddled with doubt. Social services, caught in the middle, tried to balance Bella's well-being with the demands of justice. Her foster home became a battleground of emotions. Tyler grew protective, bristling whenever he sensed Bella's distress. Mike, the foster father, argued that pushing her too hard would break her. Casey, the foster mother, walked the fine line of support and advocacy, determined to shield Bella while also cooperating with professionals. One night, after yet another meeting where the question of Bella's testimony dominated discussion, Casey sat at the kitchen table long after everyone had gone to bed. She stared at Bella's unopened notebook in the drawer, tempted to look inside, desperate for answers. What if the truth was written there? What if it held the key to the case, the evidence that could resolve everything? Her hand hovered over the drawer, then pulled back. Trust was fragile, and once broken, it could never be repaired. She left the notebook untouched. The strain took its toll on Bella too. She began chewing her nails until they bled, pulling at her sleeves until the fabric frayed. She startled at sudden noises, flinched when footsteps approached from behind. The signs of trauma, once subtle, grew harder to ignore. And yet, there were glimmers of resilience. One Saturday afternoon, as snow fell gently outside, Bella built a puzzle with Tyler at the living room table. Piece by piece, the picture came together. A cottage in the woods, smoke rising from its chimney, a light glowing in the window. When the final piece clicked into place, Bella smiled, a real smile, her eyes bright for the first time in weeks. "Done," she whispered. It was just one word, but it was enough to remind her carers that healing was possible. Still, the silence around that night remained unbroken. Bella would not speak of the violence, of the shouting, of the blow that had left her stepfather in hospital and her mother in prison. That truth stayed locked inside her, heavier than ever. As February drew to a close, the household felt the weight of what was coming. The trial was only weeks away. Prosecutors were running out of patience. The family braced themselves for the possibility that Bella would be forced into court, whether she was ready or not. And Bella herself seemed to retreat further into her shell. She spent more time alone in her room, more hours scribbling in her notebook, more nights staring at the ceiling instead of sleeping. Her silence, once a shield, was becoming a prison. The foster mother worried constantly. If Bella's silence broke, would it free her or destroy her? The question hung heavy in the air, unanswered, as winter turned toward spring. And so, by the end of February, Bella remained what she had been from the start. A girl trapped between love and truth, the silent witness whose voice could change everything, but who could not, or would not, let it be heard. March arrived with thin sunlight that did little to thaw the frost. Outside, daffodils pushed stubbornly through the cold ground, small bursts of yellow defiance. Inside the Watson home, the atmosphere was anything but bright. The trial date was set. Laura Daniels would stand accused of attempted murder, and the weight of that accusation pressed on everyone. Most of all on Bella. Her foster mother noticed the change first. Bella's silences grew longer, heavier, more guarded. If she had once allowed herself to whisper fragments of normality, a yes, a thank you, a giggle at Tyler's jokes, now even those crumbs of speech began to vanish. She withdrew, as if the looming trial were pulling her further into herself. The adults knew why. In court, Bella's voice would matter more than ever. Prosecutors needed her to testify. Defense lawyers were preparing to argue her silence as evidence of uncertainty, even manipulation. Social workers tried to prepare her, arranging gentle mock sessions with child psychologists. But Bella responded with flat refusal. One afternoon, Sophie sat with her in the living room, a folder of papers in her lap. "Bella," she said gently, "I know this is scary, but sometimes telling the truth helps everyone. It helps the court, it helps your mom, it helps you." Bella didn't look up. She traced patterns on the carpet with her finger, silent. "Would you be willing," Sophie tried again, "to come to court and just say what you saw? Just once? Just the truth?" For the briefest moment, Bella's eyes flicked upward. There was fear in them, yes, but something else too, defiance. "No," she whispered. The word was barely audible, but it was final. The silence stretched. Sophie closed the folder with a sigh. "All right," she said softly. "Not today." But the problem was bigger than today. Court was coming, whether Bella was ready or not. The Watson household felt the pressure. Mike grew restless, muttering about how unfair it was to expect so much of a 12-year-old. "She's a child," he told Casey one night. "A child. And they're treating her like the key to the whole bloody case. It's not right." Casey agreed, but she also knew how the system worked. Justice depended on witnesses. And when the only witness was a child, the machine still demanded her voice. Tyler, meanwhile, grew fiercely protective of Bella. At school, when classmates whispered about her silence, he snapped at them. At home, he sat with her for hours, coaxing her into games, distracting her with films. He never asked about that night. Perhaps instinct told him she couldn't bear it. Perhaps he simply understood that what she needed most was someone who didn't see her as evidence. Still, Bella's distress was visible. She began chewing the ends of her sleeves, tugging at loose threads until her clothes frayed. She woke with nightmares, though she denied them. She grew pale, thin, her appetite fading. Her foster mother felt helpless, watching the child disappear into silence inch by inch. Then, another twist. Laura Daniels requested Bella's testimony be heard in court, not through live questioning, but through video link. Her defense team argued that Bella's account could prove Laura had acted in self-defense. Prosecutors agreed, hoping the girl might finally reveal enough to secure a conviction. For Bella, it was unbearable. The idea of speaking about that night, even through a screen, filled her with panic. When the subject was raised, she shook her head violently, eyes wide with fear. "I can't," she whispered once. "I can't." Her foster mother gathered her close. "You don't have to do anything you're not ready for," she said. But she knew that was only half true. Courts were relentless. They didn't wait for readiness. Meanwhile, Adam Cummings continued his recovery. Physically, he grew stronger. He could walk unassisted, his speech regained clarity. But his memory of that night remained clouded. He admitted he had been drunk. He admitted he had shouted. But the moment of violence, who struck first, how hard, why, was lost to him. His testimony was a paradox. On one hand, he insisted Laura had struck him with intent. On the other, he conceded that his own behavior might have provoked her. It was enough to sustain the charges, but not enough to convict. Once again, the burden shifted to Bella, and still she said nothing. In March, a second prison visit was arranged. Bella was reluctant, but she did not refuse outright. Perhaps part of her longed to see her mother again, to cling to the familiar bond that prison walls could not erase. The visit was supervised as before. Laura entered with tears in her eyes, rushing to embrace her daughter. "My Bella," she whispered, holding her close. "I've missed you so much." Bella sat stiffly at first, then relaxed into her mother's arms. For a few minutes, they simply clung to each other. Laura stroked her hair, whispered reassurances, spoke of love and promises of a future together. But then, Laura's tone shifted. She leaned close, her voice urgent. "Bella, listen to me. You know what happened, don't you? You know I didn't mean it. You have to tell them. You have to say it wasn't like they think." The supervisors watched carefully, alert to the change. Bella froze. Her eyes widened, her breath quickened. She pulled back slightly, shaking her head. "Please," Laura urged, gripping her daughter's hands. "It's the only way, Bella. You have to help me." Bella's lips parted, but no sound came out. Her eyes filled with tears. After a moment, she jerked her hands free and turned away. The visit ended soon after. Bella left pale and trembling, refusing to look back. That night, back at the foster home, she locked herself in her room. For hours, she refused to come out. When Casey finally entered gently, Bella sat on the bed clutching her notebook, tears streaking her face. "I can't," she whispered again and again. "I can't." Her foster mother gathered her close, whispering comfort, but inside she felt a chill. The trial was coming, and Bella's silence was beginning to crack under pressure. The following weeks blurred together. Meetings, court preparations, therapy sessions. Bella endured them all with a kind of weary resignation. She drew more, wrote more, but spoke less. Her notebook grew thicker, its pages filled with words no one else could see. One day, she slid it across the table to her foster mother again. "Don't let anyone take it," she whispered. "Promise." "I promise," Casey said, sliding it safely into the drawer once more. She never looked, not because she didn't want to, but because trust was fragile. And if Bella trusted her to keep the notebook safe, that trust mattered more than any secret it contained. By late March, the air carried the first hints of spring. Trees budded, birds sang louder, the world seemed to stir awake. But inside the Watson home, the weight only grew heavier. Court was now only days away. Bella knew it. She could see it in the hushed conversations, in the tense glances exchanged by adults, in the steady stream of letters arriving in brown envelopes. She began to withdraw even further, spending hours in bed, staring at the ceiling. Her foster mother worried that the girl was shutting down completely, folding into herself in a way that might never be undone. On the last night of March, Casey found her by the window, gazing out at the dark street. "You don't have to do this alone," she whispered. Bella turned, eyes glistening, and for the first time in weeks, she spoke more than a fragment. "If I tell them," she whispered, voice shaking, "she'll never forgive me, and if I don't, he'll hate me. Either way, it's my fault." The words cut through the silence like a blade. The truth of Bella's torment wasn't just the violence she had seen. It was the impossible choice she believed she had to make: loyalty to her mother or justice for her stepfather. She buried her face in her foster mother's shoulder and sobbed. It was the first time she had allowed herself to break. And it was only the beginning. April opened with gray skies and drizzle, the kind of damp chill that seeped into bones. In the Watson household, the air was heavier still. The trial had begun. On the morning of the first hearing, Bella dressed without being asked. She chose plain clothes: jeans, a jumper, shoes with scuffed toes. Nothing that drew attention. Her foster mother watched quietly, torn between pride at the girl's composure and sorrow at the burden she carried. The courthouse loomed large, a building of stone and echoing halls, its cold authority swallowing those who entered. For Bella, it was a fortress of strangers, all of them waiting for her voice. She clutched her toy rabbit in her bag, hidden but close, a silent talisman. The courtroom was crowded. Reporters hovered with pens poised. Photographers jostled for angles. The case had captured headlines: mother accused of attempted murder, child witness holds the key. Everyone wanted to see the silent girl. Everyone wanted to hear her speak. Laura Daniels sat in the dock, pale but composed, her eyes darting constantly to Bella. She looked thinner than before, her hair tied back neatly, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. To the jury, she appeared vulnerable, even fragile. To Bella, she appeared as both mother and stranger, the woman she loved and the figure who had pleaded for her silence. Adam Cummings sat nearby, still gaunt from his injuries. He wore a suit that hung loosely on his frame, his face marked by scars and fatigue. He avoided Bella's gaze, focusing instead on the floor, as though the weight of her eyes was too much to bear. The trial began with opening statements. The prosecution painted Laura as a woman who had crossed the line from victim to aggressor, striking her partner with intent to kill. They emphasized the severity of Adam's injuries, the chaos of the household, the need for justice. The defense countered with equal force, portraying Laura as a battered woman who had endured years of abuse and lashed out in fear. They argued that Adam's drunken violence had created a storm of terror, and Laura's actions were those of desperation, not malice. And then, inevitably, the focus shifted to Bella. She was called as a witness. Her foster mother sat in the gallery, heart pounding as the girl was led to the video link room, a small, sterile chamber designed for child testimony. Bella sat before the camera, clutching her rabbit just out of view. A court officer explained gently that the people in the courtroom would see her on the screen, but she would not have to see them. The prosecutor began softly. "Bella, can you tell us your name?"
Bella hesitated.
Her lips parted. A faint whisper escaped. "Bella." It was the first word the court had heard from her. A murmur rippled through the room. "Thank you, Bella," the prosecutor said kindly. "Can you tell us how old you are?" 12. Another ripple. The silent witness was speaking. The questions moved carefully, step by step. Her school, her favorite book, her foster home. The aim was to ease her into comfort, to remind the jury that she was a child, not just evidence. Bella answered in whispers, her eyes fixed on the desk. Then came the pivot. "Bella, can you tell us about the night of December 23rd? Silence. The courtroom waited. The judge, the jury, the lawyers, the reporters all leaned forward. Bella's eyes filled with tears. She shook her head. "I can't." The prosecutor softened his tone. "It's all right, Bella. Just tell us what you remember. Anything at all." Her hands tightened on the rabbit in her lap. "They were shouting," she whispered finally. "Who was shouting?" "Mom. And Adam." Her voice cracked. She pressed her lips together. The silence stretched, broken only by the faint hum of the microphone. "What happened then?" the prosecutor asked gently. Bella's breathing quickened. Her shoulders trembled. "They were fighting," she whispered. "Did you see what happened?" Her eyes filled again. She shook her head violently. "I don't want to say." The prosecutor paused, then nodded. "That's all right, Bella. Thank you." The defense attorney stood. His tone was smooth, practiced. "Bella, you love your mom, don't you?"
Bella nodded slowly.
And you know your mum loves you? Another nod. Would you say your mum was afraid that night?
Bella froze.
Her eyes flicked up, just once, then back to the desk. She was crying. Crying because she was scared? Bella's lips trembled. Yes. The defense smiled slightly. Thank you, Bella. That's all. And just like that, her testimony was over. It wasn't the dramatic revelation prosecutors had hoped for. It wasn't the confession of violence, the clear account of who struck whom. But it was something, a sliver of truth, wrapped in silence. The days that followed were filled with expert witnesses, police officers, medical testimony. Adam himself took the stand, recounting his fragmented memories. He admitted to drinking heavily, admitted to shouting, admitted he might have lashed out first. But he insisted he remembered Laura striking him with a heavy object. Beyond that, his memory faltered. The jury listened intently, weighing each word. The defense emphasized Laura's history. The police calls, the bruises, the fear. They painted her as a woman trapped, cornered, desperate to survive. They leaned on Bella's words. She was crying. As proof that Laura had been terrified, not murderous. The prosecution pressed the severity of Adam's injuries, the blood on the floor, the weapon used. They argued that fear did not justify near-fatal violence. Day after day, the case unfolded. And through it all, Bella sat in silence, her small voice echoing in the minds of those who had heard it. When the trial closed, the jury retired. Hours passed, then a day, then another. Finally, they returned. The foreman stood, verdict slip in hand. The judge asked the question. On the charge of attempted murder, how do you find the defendant? Not guilty. A gasp rippled through the courtroom. Laura Daniels sagged with relief, tears spilling down her cheeks. Adam lowered his head, expression unreadable. Bella sat frozen, her rabbit clutched tight. But the foreman wasn't finished. On the charge of grievous bodily harm with intent, how do you find the defendant? Guilty. The courtroom erupted. Reporters scribbled furiously. Voices rose. The judge called for order. Laura wept openly, torn between relief and despair. She had escaped the most serious charge, but conviction still meant years in prison. Bella buried her face in her hands. Her silence had carried her through, but it had not saved her mother. Not completely. When the sentence was handed down weeks later, Laura received 8 years. Not life, not freedom, something in between. For Bella, it was a strange kind of justice. Her mother was punished, but not destroyed. Her stepfather survived, but scarred. And she herself remained what she had been all along. The silent witness, caught between truths too heavy for a child to bear. The trial was over, but for Bella, nothing felt finished. The courthouse faded behind her, replaced by the steady routine of foster care. But the echoes remained. The gavel striking, the lawyers' voices rising and falling, the final words of the verdict. 8 years. Laura was gone. Not forever, but long enough to feel like it. For a 12-year-old, 8 years was an eternity. By the time her mother walked free, Bella would be 20. The thought gnawed at her quietly, a grief she couldn't articulate. Back at the Watson home, everyone tried to settle into normality. School mornings, dinner around the table, weekend trips to the park. Tyler teased her. Casey watched her closely. Mike softened his gruff exterior into patience. On the surface, life resumed. But beneath, the silence remained. Bella spoke little, and when she did, her words carried a strange weight, as though each one had to fight its way out of her chest. She scribbled constantly in her notebook, filling page after page. Sometimes she drew. Small cottages, shadowed figures, animals with watchful eyes. Other times, she wrote furiously, her pen pressing so hard it tore the paper. Casey kept her promise. She never looked inside. But the sound of the pen scratching late into the night haunted her. What truths were trapped in those pages? What nightmares replayed themselves in ink? Laura wrote letters from prison. They arrived weekly, folded neatly in envelopes marked with the prison's return address. The handwriting was Bella's comfort and torment all at once. familiar loops and curls that smelled faintly of home, but carried words Bella couldn't always bear to read. "My darling girl," the letters began. "I miss you every day. I dream of you every night. Please remember that I love you more than anything." Some letters rambled about prison life, the routines, the other women, the endless waiting. Others slipped into pleading. "Bella, you know the truth. One day you'll be old enough to explain it. Please don't forget. Please don't let them twist what happened." Bella read them in silence, then folded them carefully and placed them in a shoebox under her bed. She never showed them to anyone. Her foster mother found the shoebox once when tidying the room. She didn't open it. She simply noted how heavy it had become. Secrets, folded in paper, stacked neatly in a box. Another layer of silence. Adam, too, lingered on the edges of Bella's world. Though scarred by the attack, he recovered enough to return to work eventually. Occasionally, his name surfaced in conversations between social workers and lawyers. Once, he even wrote Bella a short note, passed through official channels. "I hope you're doing okay. I'm sorry for everything. I don't blame you." She tore it up without reading it to the end. The mere sight of his handwriting sent her trembling. She wanted no part of reconciliation. Whatever he intended, it was too late. He was the man whose shouting had filled her childhood, whose drunken rages had carved fear into her bones. She wanted no letters, no apologies, just absence. School became another battlefield. Children are curious, sometimes cruel. Word of the trial spread quickly, and whispers followed Bella down the hallways. "That's her, the girl whose mum's in prison. She saw it happen, but she won't say." Teachers tried to shield her, but gossip seeped through cracks. A few classmates offered kindness, sitting with her at lunch, inviting her to games. But Bella shrank from attention, retreating into corners, hiding behind books. She carried her silence like armor, even when it isolated her completely. Her foster brother Tyler was her fiercest defender. He confronted kids who whispered, glared at those who stared. Once, he even shoved a boy who made a cruel remark, earning himself a detention. When asked why, he simply said, "She's my sister." The word made Bella smile faintly, just once. Sister, a word that meant safety. Therapy continued. Week after week, Bella sat in a quiet room with a child psychologist, crayons on the table, soft toys in the corner. The therapist encouraged her to draw, to write, to play. Slowly, fragments emerged. She drew houses with cracked windows. She sketched a figure lying on the floor, another standing over it. When asked, she shrugged. "It's just a picture." She wrote short stories about animals. Foxes cornered by hunters, birds trapped in cages. When the therapist asked what the animals were afraid of, Bella whispered, "Shadows. Always shadows." The therapist noted it carefully. Shadows that chased Bella. Shadows that silenced her. Shadows that turned her words to whispers. Spring turned to summer. Months passed. Bella turned 13 quietly, without a party, without a cake. Her foster family offered gifts, sang to her at the table, but she seemed distant, as though birthdays no longer belonged to her. Instead, she sat outside that evening, notebook on her knees, watching the sun dip below the horizon. Casey joined her, settling into the chair beside her. For a long time, they sat in silence. Finally, Bella spoke. "Do you think she'll hate me?" Casey turned. "Who?" "Mom. Why would she hate you?" Bella's eyes stayed on the fading light. "Because I didn't save her." Casey's heart ached. She reached for the girl's hand. "Bella, you're not responsible for what happened. You couldn't have saved anyone. You're just a child." Bella's hand trembled in hers. She didn't argue, but her silence spoke volumes. In her heart, she believed otherwise. She believed she had failed both of them, the mother she loved, the stepfather she feared. And that guilt was her burden alone. Letters kept coming from prison. Bella kept stacking them in the shoebox. Adam faded further into the background. School continued with its whispers and cruelties. Through it all, Bella's silence deepened. But within that silence, something else grew. A determination, fragile but steady. She began writing more than ever, pages spilling from her notebook. She never shared them, but she filled them with such intensity that Casey sometimes wondered if, one day, Bella would hand them over like she had before, that maybe the truth was being written in secret, waiting for the right moment to surface. For now, though, the truth remained hidden. By autumn, nearly a year had passed since that night. Laura was deep into her sentence. Adam was living quietly, rarely seen. Bella remained in care, older now but still shadowed. And yet, something shifted. She started to smile more at Tyler's jokes. She joined her foster family on small outings, laughing softly at roller coasters, at picnics, at silly board games. She didn't speak much, but she began to live again, if only in fragments. Casey saw it and clung to it. Healing was not a straight line. It was messy, fragile, uneven, but it was possible. Still, at night, Bella lay awake, staring at the ceiling. The guilt never fully left her. The shadows never stopped creeping in. She was still the silent witness, still the girl who had seen too much, spoken too little, and carried the weight of it all in silence. Adolescence crept in quietly, reshaping Bella's world without warning. She was 14 when the changes began to show. A taller frame, sharper features, hair that fell longer over her shoulders. At school, her classmates were swept up in the whirl of teenage life. First crushes, new fashions, music that pulsed with rebellion. For Bella, those things existed at the edges, faint echoes she observed but rarely joined. Her silence, once tolerated as childhood shyness, now drew sharper scrutiny. Teachers urged her to participate. Peers prodded her with questions. Therapists encouraged her to find her voice. But Bella remained distant, her words sparse, her eyes carrying the weight of secrets she still refused to share. The Watson household adapted as best they could. Tyler, now a teenager himself, grew protective in a quieter way. He didn't shove bullies anymore. He simply walked beside Bella, a presence that discouraged whispers. Mike tried to offer fatherly advice, awkward but earnest. Casey remained steady, patient, watching for cracks in the girl's armor. But beneath the surface, Bella wrestled with battles none of them could see. The letters from Laura continued, filling the shoebox to overflowing. At first, Bella devoured them eagerly, each one a lifeline. But as the years passed, the words began to feel heavier, more suffocating. My darling Bella, they always began. I love you. I miss you. I dream of the day we are together again. Some letters begged for reassurance. Promise you'll wait for me. Promise you won't forget. Others edged toward manipulation. I know you didn't mean to let them twist things, but one day you'll put it right. By 15, Bella began leaving the letters unopened for days, sometimes weeks. She still stacked them carefully in the shoebox, but she no longer rushed to unfold their promises. Part of her longed for her mother's love. Another part recoiled from the pressure hidden between the lines. She never spoke of this conflict. She never asked for advice. Instead, she carried the letters like extra weight in her backpack, a burden she chose not to share. Adam drifted further from view, though his shadow never disappeared entirely. Bella heard his name occasionally, usually through whispers in court reports or social service updates. He never attempted contact again. For Bella, his absence was a strange relief. Yet in nightmares, his voice still rose, thick with alcohol, echoing through the rooms of her childhood. The therapist encouraged her to write about him, to give shape to the fear. Bella shook her head.
No.
Instead, she drew. In one sketchbook, she filled page after page with looming figures, mouths wide in silent screams, hands clutching at smaller shapes that tried to run. The therapist saw them as revelations. Bella saw them only as shadows made visible. At school, adolescence sharpened cruelty. Bella's silence became a target. Mute girl, some called her. Prison girl, others whispered. Her face flushed at the taunts, but she never responded. Her silence frustrated bullies, but it also isolated her further. A few teachers saw past it. One English teacher, Mrs. Harris, encouraged Bella's writing. She praised her essays, noted her keen eye for detail. "You have a gift, Bella," she said once, handing back a piece covered in red marks of approval. "Even if you don't say much, your words on paper matter." Bella's cheeks burned. For once, silence felt like strength, not weakness. She began writing more seriously, short stories, poems, even beginnings of novels. She never shared them beyond class assignments, but she filled notebooks steadily, as though her unspoken voice had found another way out. The foster home grew quieter as Tyler drifted into his own teenage life. Friends, football, part-time jobs, his world expanded beyond the family. He still looked out for Bella, but less closely now. She noticed the shift and accepted it without complaint. People always left, she thought. Best not to expect otherwise. Casey remained her anchor. She celebrated Bella's small victories. A good grade, a quiet smile, a rare spoken sentence. She respected her silences, never pushing too hard. Sometimes she wondered if she should pry into the notebooks, the shoebox, the sketches, but she never did. Trust, she reminded herself, was the only thing holding Bella together. Mike tried in his own way, though his gruffness sometimes missed the mark. "You've got to toughen up, love," he told her once when she came home pale after school. Bella simply looked at him, then turned away. Toughness, she thought, wasn't the problem. It was the silence eating her alive. By 16, Bella's identity crisis deepened. Who was she, beyond the silent witness? Was she the daughter of a convicted criminal? The stepdaughter of a broken man? The foster child who never spoke? The questions haunted her. She experimented quietly with her appearance, changing her hair, trying darker clothes, then lighter ones. She wrote stories about girls who vanished, about mothers who returned, about children who grew wings and flew away. At night, she lay awake, wondering if she would ever be free of the trial, the verdict, the shadows. Sometimes, she dreamed of her mother walking through the front door, arms open wide. Other times, she dreamed of Adam's voice, shouting her name. She woke gasping, the toy rabbit clutched in her arms even as she grew too old for toys. One evening, at 16 and a half, Bella turned to Casey unexpectedly. "Do you think people ever really forget?" she asked. Casey looked up from her book. "Forget what, love? Bad things?" Casey paused.
No.
"Not forget, but sometimes they fade. They don't hurt as much." Bella's eyes lingered on the shoebox under her bed. "Not for me," she whispered, and that was the end of the conversation. As exams approached, Bella threw herself into schoolwork. It was one thing she could control. She studied late into the night, filling notebooks not with secrets this time, but with equations, essays, vocabulary lists. When results came back, she passed nearly everything with strong marks. Her foster family celebrated with cake, candles, cheers. Bella smiled faintly, accepting the praise. Inside, though, she felt a strange emptiness. Success in school didn't erase the silence. It didn't change the shadows. Her mother wrote another letter, congratulating her on the results. Bella tucked it into the shoebox, unopened. At 17, Bella's foster care status shifted. Social services began discussing long-term plans, university, independent living, the possibility of moving into her own flat. The thought terrified her. She had built safety within the Watson home. Leaving it felt like stepping into a void. Casey reassured her. "We'll always be here, Bella, no matter what." But Bella wasn't sure. Promises were fragile. People left. Shadows lingered. By the time she reached 18, Bella was legally an adult. She celebrated quietly, with a small cake at the Watsons' table. No party, no fanfare. Just a quiet acknowledgement that she had survived childhood, survived adolescence, survived the silence. But adulthood brought its own questions. What would she do with her life? Would she carry her silence forever? Would she forgive her mother, her stepfather, herself? For now, she had no answers. Only pages of writing, stacks of letters, and years of silence behind her. And somewhere beyond prison walls, her mother counted down the days, waiting for release. Adulthood, when it finally arrived, felt less like freedom and more like standing at the edge of a cliff. At 18, Bella left the Watson household with 2 suitcases, a box of notebooks, and the shoebox full of letters she still couldn't throw away. Social services arranged a small flat for her, part of a program designed to help care leavers transition into independence. The flat smelled faintly of paint and bleach, its walls bare, its furniture mismatched. Bella stood in the doorway on her first night, the silence pressing in from all sides. For years she had lived with the quiet bustle of a foster family. The clatter of dishes, Tyler's laughter, Casey's voice calling from the kitchen. Now there was only stillness. She unpacked slowly, clothes into the wardrobe, books onto the shelf. The rabbit, worn now, one ear drooping, onto the bed. The shoebox of letters slid beneath it, hidden but always close. And then she sat at the table, notebook open, pen in hand, staring at the blank page. She wrote one line, then stopped. I don't know who I am without the silence. Life as a care leaver was practical and relentless. Bills arrived, groceries had to be bought, jobs applied for. Bella took a part-time role at a bookstore, shelving novels, ringing up customers, inhaling the familiar scent of paper and ink. The work was steady, predictable, safe. But outside those hours, the loneliness gnawed at her. She attended college classes in literature and creative writing, sitting quietly at the back, never raising her hand. Professors praised her essays. Classmates sometimes invited her to join them for coffee. She always declined politely. Conversation was still a minefield, and silence remained her shield. Casey visited often, sometimes with Mike, sometimes alone. She brought food, blankets, little things to make the flat feel like home. She worried about Bella's isolation but didn't push. One step at a time, she reminded herself. Tyler, now older and busy with his own life, dropped in occasionally too. He teased her gently about the mountain of books on her shelves, reminded her to eat properly, told her she could call him any time. She rarely did, but his offer mattered. And always there were the letters. Laura's release date loomed closer with each one. By Bella's 19th birthday, her mother had served nearly 7 years. Just over a year remained. The letters had grown desperate. Bella, I dream of the day I walk free and see you waiting for me. Please promise you'll be there. Promise we can start again. Bella read them with a strange detachment now. She still loved her mother, that much never changed. But the words felt heavy, like chains rather than wings. She wanted to believe in reunion, in healing, yet part of her feared it deeply. What would happen when the silence met the truth? Relationships were another battlefield. At 20, Bella met a fellow student named Daniel. He was kind, soft-spoken, with a quiet humor that drew her out. He asked her to join him for coffee after class. To her own surprise, she said yes. Their friendship grew slowly. He never pushed when she fell silent, never demanded answers she wasn't ready to give. One evening, as they sat in a cafe, he asked gently, "Why don't you talk much?" Bella froze, fingers tightening around her mug. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then, softly, she whispered, "Because talking makes things real." Daniel didn't ask again. He simply nodded and changed the subject. For Bella, that moment was both terrifying and comforting. Someone had glimpsed the truth and hadn't turned away. Yet intimacy carried risks. When Daniel leaned in to kiss her one night after walking her home, she flinched. Her body stiffened, breath caught. He pulled back immediately, apology in his eyes. "It's okay," he whispered. "Only if you want to." Bella shook her head, retreating inside. She didn't see him for weeks after. The past had carved itself too deeply into her bones. Closeness felt dangerous. Love felt like a trap. By 21, Bella had finished her college diploma. Her professors urged her to pursue writing seriously. One in particular, an older lecturer named Dr. Singh, pulled her aside after class. "Bella, your voice on paper is extraordinary. You've lived through things most people can't imagine, and you capture emotion with precision. Have you considered submitting your work for publication?" Bella shook her head quickly, heart pounding. Her words, her private refuge, out in the world, felt unthinkable. Dr. Singh smiled kindly. One day, perhaps, when you're ready. The idea lingered, frightening and exhilarating all at once. And then came the day she had both longed for and dreaded. Laura's release. Bella was 22. The prison gates opened, and her mother stepped out, thinner, older, but still unmistakably Laura. She clutched a small bag, her eyes scanning the horizon for one face. Bella wasn't there. She couldn't bring herself to go. Instead, Casey met Laura outside, standing quietly in her place. The reunion was tense, filled with unspoken questions. Laura's first words were, "Where's Bella?" "She needs time," Casey said gently. "She still loves you, but she's not ready." Laura's face crumpled. Tears spilled, years of longing breaking free. But she nodded. "I'll wait," she whispered. Weeks passed before Bella agreed to see her. The meeting took place in a cafe, arranged carefully by social workers. Bella sat at the table, her rabbit tucked in her bag even though she was far too old for it. She tapped her fingers nervously against her notebook as the door opened and her mother walked in. For a moment, time froze. Laura's eyes filled instantly. "Bella." Bella swallowed hard. She wanted to run, wanted to cry, wanted to scream. Instead, she whispered, "Hi, Mum." 2 words, enough to shatter the silence, if only for a moment. The conversation that followed was halting, fractured, layered with years of separation. Laura spoke of dreams, of promises, of wanting to rebuild. Bella listened, nodded, but said little. The silence was still her companion, and yet beneath it something stirred. Possibility, a question. Could they start again? Or was the silence too deep, the shadows too heavy, for love to survive? The first meeting in the cafe had been cautious, almost polite, as though mother and daughter were strangers trying to remember how to belong to each other. For Bella, it was overwhelming. She had imagined that moment for years, but the reality was sharper, messier. Her mother's face was thinner, her hair streaked with gray, her voice softer but edged with a desperation that time in prison hadn't erased. Laura, on the other hand, clung to the encounter as though it were salvation. She reached for Bella's hand across the table, tears spilling freely. "You're so grown up. I can't believe I've missed everything. Your birthdays, your school. All those years." Bella sat stiffly, fingers cold beneath her mother's touch. "I grew up," she whispered. Laura flinched at the distance in her daughter's tone but forced a smile. "And you've done so well. College, writing, Casey told me. I'm so proud of you." The words should have warmed Bella. Instead, they felt strange, as if coming from someone who had forfeited the right to say them. In the weeks that followed, they met again, and again, sometimes in cafes, sometimes in small parks where the world felt quieter. Each meeting carried the same mixture of longing and unease. Laura spoke constantly, filling silences with stories of prison life, plans for the future, dreams of rebuilding a home together. She imagined Bella moving in with her, starting afresh, leaving behind the Watsons, leaving behind the past. Bella listened, but rarely responded. When she did, her words were clipped. "I like where I am. I'm not ready. Maybe later." Laura tried to mask her disappointment, but it seeped through. "I thought, after everything, we'd finally be together again." Bella looked down at her notebook, pen hovering. She wanted to explain that love and trust were not the same, that the silence was not only hers to break, that forgiveness didn't erase the years apart. But the words tangled in her throat, so she said nothing. One evening, Bella returned home from one of these meetings and pulled the shoebox out from under her bed. She emptied it onto the floor. Years of folded letters, hundreds of pages, her mother's handwriting stacked like bricks. She read through them one after another. Pleas, promises, apologies, demands. By the time she reached the bottom, her hands were trembling. She realized something then. She had carried her mother's voice all these years, in paper and ink, and now that her mother was free, she wasn't sure she wanted to carry it anymore. For the first time, she considered throwing the letters away. But when she lifted the box, she hesitated. She couldn't do it. Not yet. Their meetings continued, and cracks began to show. Laura wanted Bella to talk about that night. The night everything had fallen apart. You were there, Bella. You saw it. You know, I didn't mean for it to happen the way they said. Bella's stomach tightened. I don't want to talk about it. Please, Laura pressed. You're the only one who knows. If you tell me what you remember, maybe it will make sense. Maybe we can move on. Bella's eyes darkened. She shook her head violently.
No.
The silence that followed was louder than shouting. Laura's face crumpled, torn between guilt and frustration. Don't shut me out, she whispered. Not you. Not after everything. But Bella was already walking away. Meanwhile, the Watsons remained Bella's anchor. She visited them often, seeking the comfort of their familiar home. Casey noticed the strain etched into her face after each meeting with her mother. She wants too much, doesn't she? Casey asked gently one evening.
Bella nodded faintly.
She wants me to pretend. Pretend what? That nothing happened. That we can just go back. Casey sighed, brushing Bella's hair back like she had when she was younger. Love doesn't mean pretending, Bella. You don't owe her that. You only owe yourself honesty. Bella closed her eyes, pressing her cheek against Casey's hand. In that moment, she felt like a child again, safe in the only home where silence had never been forced upon her. Laura struggled to rebuild her own life. Finding work was difficult with a criminal record, and adjusting to freedom after years inside left her restless. She leaned on Bella heavily, seeking validation, companionship, reassurance. For Bella, it felt like being pulled underwater. Each phone call, each meeting drained her. She wanted to love her mother, but she also wanted to breathe. One afternoon, after yet another tense conversation, she confided in her therapist. She makes me feel guilty for not giving her what she wants. Like if I don't save her, I'm betraying her. The therapist nodded. And do you believe that? Bella's eyes filled. Sometimes, but I don't want to. Then maybe it's time to set boundaries, the therapist suggested softly. Loving someone doesn't mean losing yourself to them. The thought lingered in Bella's mind long after the session ended. Boundaries. The word felt powerful, terrifying, necessary. At 23, Bella faced a choice. Her mother wanted her to move in, to start a new life together. The Watsons encouraged her to stand firm. In the end, Bella chose independence. She stayed in her flat, continued working at the bookstore, continued writing in secret. Laura wept when Bella told her, I thought I'd get a second chance. I thought we could be a family again. We can, Bella whispered, her voice trembling. But not like before. Not under the same roof. Not yet. It was the hardest thing she had ever said. Their relationship settled into a fragile rhythm after that. Visits, phone calls, letters still, though fewer now. Love remained, but it was love stretched thin by distance and silence. And as Bella walked further into adulthood, she began to realize something. The silence was no longer only about fear. It was about choice. She was learning when to speak, when to stay quiet, when to protect herself with words unspoken. The silent witness was growing into something else entirely. The day Bella's book was published was quieter than she had imagined.
No flashing cameras, no cheering crowds.
Just a cardboard box left at her flat door, filled with copies bearing her pseudonym across the cover. She knelt on the floor, slicing the tape with trembling fingers. When she lifted the first copy out, its weight startled her. For years, her voice had existed only in notebooks and shoeboxes, in whispers never spoken. Now it had become paper and ink, something strangers could hold. She turned the pages slowly, her eyes tracing words she had once written in the stillness of night. They no longer belonged only to her. They were alive now, breathing in other people's hands. Reviews trickled in over the following weeks. Some praised her work as hauntingly honest. Others described it as raw and unflinching. A few critics speculated about the writer's identity. The stories, though fictional, carried the unmistakable weight of lived experience. Readers debated online. Had the author survived abuse? Were the stories memoir disguised as fiction? Bella watched from the sidelines, anonymous but seen in a way she had never been before. It was exhilarating. It was terrifying. Casey was the first person she told. She handed her a copy during a visit, her hands shaking. "It's mine," Bella whispered. Casey's eyes widened. She turned the book over, scanning the pages, her face softening with pride. "Bella, this is incredible." Bella's throat tightened. "Don't tell anyone. Not yet." "Of course," Casey promised. "But I'm so proud of you. You've turned all that silence into something beautiful." Bella pressed the book against her chest. For the first time, she almost believed it. Laura's reaction was different. Bella hadn't planned to tell her mother, but secrets rarely stayed hidden long. One of Laura's acquaintances stumbled across the book, recognized threads of familiarity in its pages, and mentioned it to her. Laura called Bella the next day, her voice sharp. "Why didn't you tell me you were publishing a book?"
Bella frose.
"I didn't think." "And these stories," Laura interrupted, "they're about us, aren't they? About me. About what happened." "They're fiction," Bella whispered. Laura's laugh was bitter. "Fiction? Don't insult me. Anyone who knows us could see it. You've put my life on display. My mistakes. My prison years. Did you even think about how this makes me look?" Bella's chest ached. "It wasn't about you. It was about me. About surviving." Laura's silence on the other end was heavy, then cold. "You've betrayed me, Bella. After everything I went through. After everything I lost. Even you've turned against me." The line went dead. Bella sat in the quiet, the phone heavy in her hand. She knew this confrontation had been inevitable, but the sting still cut deep. For weeks, Laura didn't speak to her. She ignored calls, canceled visits. Bella tried not to crumble under the weight of her absence. Instead, she buried herself in the growing noise around the book. Her publisher encouraged her to do interviews, but she declined every request. She wasn't ready to let the world hear her actual voice. She wanted her words to speak without her. Still, her name or her pseudonym gained traction. More opportunities followed. Readings, panel invitations, even talk of a second book. Each offer felt like a door opening. But behind every door, she could still feel her mother's shadow pressing close. Daniel reappeared around this time. He had followed her work quietly, recognizing her voice in the pages even before she admitted it. One evening, he knocked on her door, holding a copy of her book. "I knew it was you," he said softly. Bella's eyes widened. "How?" "The way you write silence," he said. "It felt like you." She let him in, and for hours they talked. Really talked. More than she ever had before. About writing, about fear, about how silence could be both armor and prison. When he reached for her hand, she didn't flinch this time. But even as her world expanded, the tension with Laura deepened. One rainy afternoon, Laura appeared at her flat unannounced. Her clothes were damp, her eyes red. "We need to talk," she said. Bella hesitated, then stepped aside. Laura paced the room, her anger sharp but threaded with desperation. "Why did you do it, Bella? Why couldn't you just let it lie? I came out of prison hoping we could rebuild. And now the world knows me as some villain in your stories." "They don't know it's you," Bella said softly. Laura stopped, eyes blazing. "But I know. I know you've been keeping score. And now everyone who reads it will think I'm a monster." Tears welled in Bella's eyes. "I didn't write to punish you. I wrote to save myself." Laura's voice broke. "And what about saving me? Don't I matter?" Bella shook her head slowly. "I can't save you, Mum. I can only save me." The words hung between them, heavier than any silence that had come before. Laura collapsed into a chair, sobbing. For the first time, Bella didn't move to comfort her. She simply sat across the room, steady, unflinching, her book resting on the table like a quiet declaration of independence. The book continued to spread. Reviews grew louder, sales stronger. Bella's pseudonym became a name whispered in literary circles. She was invited to contribute to anthologies, to speak at universities. She declined most offers, but each invitation reminded her that her silence was no longer total. She had chosen to break it in her own way on her own terms. And even though Laura's anger cut deep, Bella knew something fundamental had shifted. She was no longer only the silent witness. She was the storyteller. Her voice, once hidden, now belonged to her. The first time Bella saw a stranger reading her book on the train, her breath caught. The woman sat near the window, umbrella dripping against her knees, eyes glued to the page. Every so often, her lips parted, as if she were silently mouthing the words. Bella wanted to look away, but she couldn't. Her story, the fragments of her life reshaped into fiction, was alive in someone else's hands. It was terrifying. It was thrilling. She stepped off at the next station, heart pounding. That night, she wrote in her notebook, "They're reading my silence, and I don't know whether to hide or to speak louder." As her recognition grew, so did the invitations. Book festivals, panel discussions, writing residencies. At first, Bella declined them all. The thought of standing before an audience, of exposing her real voice, sent panic spiraling through her chest. But her publisher pressed gently. "You don't have to share everything. Just talk about writing, about stories. People are moved by your words. They want to hear you." Casey echoed the encouragement. "You've carried so much alone. Maybe it's time to let people see the strength in what you've built." Reluctantly, Bella agreed to one small event, a local library reading. The night of the reading, her hands shook as she clutched her copy. A small audience sat before her, 30 people at most, waiting quietly. When she began to read aloud, her voice wavered at first. But as the sentences flowed, something shifted. She wasn't speaking for herself alone. She was speaking for every silent child, every hidden witness. By the time she finished, the room was hushed. Then came the applause, warm, sustained, real. Bella blinked back tears. For the first time, she realized silence wasn't her only language. Laura, however, saw things differently. News of Bella's growing public presence reached her through neighbors, acquaintances, whispers that Bella's book is about her childhood. One evening, she confronted her daughter in a storm of words. "You're parading our private life in front of strangers. Do you have any idea what people think of me now? You've ruined any chance I had to move on." Bella tried to remain calm. "Mom, no one knows it's you. No one even knows it's me. It's under a pseudonym." Laura's eyes burned. "But I know, and it feels like betrayal." The words sliced through Bella, but she held her ground. "I'm not betraying you. I'm saving myself. That's all I've ever been trying to do." Laura's expression hardened. "Then maybe I don't belong in your new life at all." She left without another word. The estrangement deepened. Weeks passed with no contact. Bella felt the absence keenly, but also with a strange clarity. For years, her life had revolved around managing her mother's expectations, balancing love with survival. Now, she began to see what it meant to stand apart. She poured herself into writing a second book. Not fiction this time, but memoir. It was the boldest step she had ever taken. She wrote about the silence, about the foster home, about the shoebox of letters. She didn't name names, but she didn't disguise the pain. Each page was a confrontation, each sentence a reclaiming. Daniel became her confidant through this process. He read drafts, offered quiet encouragement, held her when the memories grew too heavy. Their relationship deepened, not with fireworks, but with steady, gentle persistence. One night, Bella asked him, "Do you think I'm being cruel to my mom by writing this?" Daniel shook his head. "You're not being cruel. You're telling the truth. And truth isn't cruelty. It's survival." Bella stared at him, tears glistening. "But what if it destroys her?" "Then that's her battle," Daniel said softly. "Not yours." By 28, Bella finished the memoir draft. Her publisher read it with reverence. "This is extraordinary," they said. "It's going to change people's lives." Bella felt both exhilarated and terrified. For so long, her silence had been her armor. Publishing this book meant shedding it entirely. That night, she sat at her desk, staring at the manuscript. She thought of the rabbit tucked away in her drawer, of Casey's steady love, of Laura's broken eyes. And then she whispered aloud to herself, to the silence, to the little girl she had once been, "It's time." When the memoir was announced, speculation about the author's identity surged. Readers pieced together clues, rumors swirled. Bella's pseudonym no longer offered the protection it once had. Laura called again, furious. "You're going to destroy me. Do you understand that? Whatever reputation I have left, gone." Bella's voice trembled, but it was steady. "Mom, I never wanted to destroy you, but I won't destroy myself to protect you anymore." On the other end of the line, Laura sobbed. "Then we're done, Bella. Do you hear me? Done." The call ended. Bella sat in the quiet, tears falling freely. But beneath the grief, a new strength glowed. For the first time, she had chosen herself completely. The memoir arrived in stores on a gray morning in spring. Bella hadn't planned to leave her flat that day, but the thought gnawed at her. By noon, she pulled on her coat and walked into town. The bookshop near the square had a small display by the window. 3 copies of her book stacked neatly, her pseudonym across the spine. Her chest tightened. This was different from her first book. That had been fiction cloaked in shadows. This was raw truth, stripped bare. She lingered at the window until a passerby stopped, pointed at the display, and murmured, "I've heard about that one. Supposed to be powerful." Bella slipped inside quickly, heart pounding. Within a week, reviews began to flood in. An unflinching portrait of childhood trauma and resilience. A voice long silenced, finally breaking free. A haunting memoir that will stay with you. Some praised her courage. Others criticized her anonymity, demanding she reveal her real name. A few speculated about the family behind the story, digging into public records, connecting dots that Bella had tried desperately to obscure. She avoided the internet after that. But no amount of avoidance could shield her from what came next. Laura found out the memoir had reached the bestseller lists. She appeared at Bella's flat unannounced, her face pale, her hands trembling. "How could you?" she hissed, shoving a copy onto the table. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" Bella steadied her voice. "I told my story, Mum. That's all I did." Laura's eyes filled with rage and hurt. "Your story? You've dragged me through the mud. Everyone knows. The prison, the trial, the violence. Do you think people don't remember? They'll put it all together." Bella felt her throat tighten, but she stood her ground. "I didn't use your name. I didn't set out to shame you. I set out to free myself." Laura slammed her fist against the table. "Free yourself? You've chained me for life. People will whisper about me forever. I thought prison was my punishment, but no, it's this. You've made sure I'll never escape it." Tears blurred Bella's vision. "I lived in that silence for years, carrying what happened so you didn't have to. I can't carry it anymore. I won't." The air between them burned. Finally, Laura stormed out, slamming the door behind her. That night, Bella curled on the sofa, clutching her rabbit. The silence felt heavier than ever, but it wasn't the silence of a child this time. It was the silence of a woman who had chosen to tell the truth, no matter the cost. The memoir's reach widened rapidly. Book clubs dissected it. Journalists wrote think pieces. Survivors sent letters and emails pouring out their gratitude. One message read, "You gave me the courage to speak after 30 years of silence. Thank you." Another, "I thought I was alone. Now I know I'm not." Bella read them all, her heart breaking and mending in equal measure. For the first time, she understood that her voice was not just hers. It had become a lifeline for others still trapped in the dark. But with recognition came intrusion. Reporters lingered outside her building, knocking on neighbors' doors, pressing for details about the mystery author. Old photographs of Laura surfaced online. Tabloids speculated about her identity, dragging up fragments of the trial, the hospital, the violence. Bella's stomach churned every time she saw Laura's face in print. Daniel tried to reassure her. "This will pass. They'll move on to the next story." But Bella shook her head. "They're digging in the wrong places. They want to expose me, but all they're doing is exposing her. And she'll never forgive me for that. Casey and Mike invited Bella to the Watsons' home for dinner. Sitting at their familiar table, she felt herself breathe more easily for the first time in weeks. "You've done something extraordinary," Casey said, reaching across to squeeze her hand. "Not just for yourself, but for everyone who reads your words." Bella's eyes filled. "But it's hurting her. It's hurting Mum." Mike's voice was steady. "She made her choices, Bella. You're not responsible for carrying her shame anymore." Bella sat in silence, the warmth of their home wrapping around her like a blanket. For once, she allowed herself to believe they were right. Then came the letter. One morning, a plain envelope arrived at her flat, no return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper, handwriting jagged and uneven. "You think the world knows the truth now? They don't. You've told half the story. Maybe it's time the rest comes out." Bella's blood ran cold. The letter wasn't signed, but she knew it wasn't from her mother. The tone was different, sharper, threatening. She read it 3 times, her hands shaking. Who else knew? Who else had been watching all these years? The silence she had broken now echoed with a new, chilling question. What truths were still hidden in the shadows? The letter would not leave her mind. She read it over and over, the jagged words burning into her memory. "You've told half the story. Maybe it's time the rest comes out." At night, she dreamt of shadows again. Doors half open, voices cut short, a weight pressing down on her chest. She woke in sweat, heart hammering, convinced someone was standing in the room. Daniel urged her to go to the police. "It's a threat, Bella. They need to know." But Bella shook her head. "It's not explicit. So warning. A taunt. They just tell me to ignore it." Still, she tucked the letter into her shoebox, beneath the rabbit, as if hiding it might lessen its power. For days, she moved through life with a knot in her stomach. Who had sent it? Laura? No, the handwriting was wrong, the tone too pointed. Casey?
Impossible.
A stranger? Perhaps. But then how would they know? She thought of Adam. He had disappeared from her life years ago after his hospital recovery, fading into silence. Could it be him? Had he resurfaced after all this time? The uncertainty gnawed at her. One evening, Bella sat with Casey on the porch, the spring air cool and soft. "I got a letter," Bella admitted, her voice barely above a whisper.
Bredzi.
"It said I only told half the story." Casey frowned. "What does that mean?" Bella hugged her knees. "I don't know, but it terrifies me. What if there are things I don't remember? What if there's more to that night than I've ever known?" Casey placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Bella, memory is complicated. Trauma distorts, but you've lived with the truth you had. That doesn't make it less valid." Bella nodded, but the words didn't soothe her, because deep down, she wasn't sure anymore. Determined to find answers, Bella began to dig. She requested old court records, transcripts of testimony. She scoured newspaper archives, piecing together fragmented accounts. Most of it she already knew, the trial, the charges, the verdict. But here and there, lines caught her attention. A neighbor reporting hearing 2 distinct voices shouting that night. A paramedic mentioning injuries that didn't entirely match the official story. A brief reference to a police officer who had since retired, whose notes were inconclusive. The fragments unsettled her. Had she missed something all along? She decided to visit Laura, despite their estrangement. When her mother opened the door, her expression hardened instantly. "What do you want?" "I need to ask you something," Bella said softly. Laura crossed her arms. "About your book?"
No.
"About that night." For a moment, Laura's face flickered. Fear, anger, something else. Then she snapped, "I told the truth in court. I defended myself. That's all there is." Bella held her gaze. "Then why did someone send me a letter saying I haven't told the whole story?" Laura froze. For a heartbeat, Bella thought she saw guilt flash in her eyes. But then Laura turned away sharply. "People want attention. Don't let them play games with you." Her voice was firm, but her hands trembled. Bella left more unsettled than before. That night she dreamt vividly. She was back in her childhood bedroom, the walls closing in, the shouts downstairs echoing louder than ever. She tried to move, but her legs wouldn't work. When she looked to the doorway, a shadowy figure stood watching. Not Adam, not Laura, someone else. She woke gasping. The image burned into her mind. Daniel grew worried. "This is eating you alive," he said one morning as she sat at the kitchen table, staring at court transcripts. "I need to know," Bella whispered. "What if my whole life, my silence, my writing, everything, is built on half a truth?" Daniel took her hands. "Then maybe it's time to face the other half. But you can't do it alone." She began seeking out people from the past. She tracked down the retired police officer mentioned in the records. His name was Detective Harris, now in his 70s, living in a quiet village. He agreed to meet her at a cafe. When she asked about his notes, his expression grew solemn. "I always thought there was more to that night," he admitted. "But the case was messy. Evidence conflicted. In the end, the Crown built the strongest narrative they could. A mother defending herself against a violent partner. It fit, so they ran with it." Bella leaned forward, her stomach twisting. "What didn't fit?" Harris hesitated, then lowered his voice. "The injuries. Adam's head wound. It wasn't consistent with a single strike. And Bella, there were footprints in the hallway. Small ones. Too small to be his, too large to be your mother's." Bella's blood turned to ice. "Are you saying I was there?" Harris shook his head quickly. "Not necessarily, but someone was. Someone else." The room spun around her. The silence of her childhood suddenly felt like a shroud covering a truth too dark to name. That evening, Bella sat alone in her flat, staring at the shoebox in front of her. She opened it slowly, lifting the rabbit, the letters, the notebooks. Her hand brushed against the anonymous letter again. She unfolded it, staring at the jagged handwriting. "You've told half the story." For the first time, she wondered. Had her silence not just protected her mother, but hidden something she herself had seen or done? That night, the thought chilled her to the bone. The revelation from Detective Harris gnawed at Bella like a stone in her stomach. Footprints in the hallway, injuries that didn't add up, someone else there that night. She replayed the words endlessly. Too small to be his, too large to be your mother's. Her own feet at 8 years old. Could they have matched? The thought made her shiver. She pressed her hands to her face, whispering, "No, couldn't. I didn't." But the silence of her past no longer felt protective, felt accusing. She decided she had to find Adam. After years of absence, tracing him was difficult. His name had surfaced in scattered records, hospital transfers, temporary housing. Finally, Bella tracked him to a seaside town, a small flat above a fish shop. When he opened the door, she barely recognized him. His once strong frame had withered, his hair gray, his skin weathered. "Bella?" he said hoarsely, as if her name carried both shock and bitterness. "What are you doing here?" "I need answers," she whispered. Inside, the flat smelled of damp salt and stale cigarettes. Adam lowered himself into a chair, wincing at the effort. "You want to know about that night?" he said flatly. Bella nodded, her throat dry. He lit a cigarette, staring at the smoke. "Your mother and I fought. That much you know. She struck me, yes. But it wasn't just her." Bella's heart thudded. "What do you mean?" Adam's eyes flicked to her, sharp. "You were there. You came into the room. I remember you were crying, shouting. Then something hit me. Hard. I went down. After that, it's a blur." Her chest clenched.
No.
"I didn't." Adam leaned forward, his voice low. "Maybe you don't remember, or maybe you don't want to, but I'll never forget the look in your eyes. Like a cornered animal." Bella staggered back, shaking her head. "You're lying. You just want to blame me." Adam crushed his cigarette in the ashtray. "Believe what you want, but I wasn't the only one bleeding that night." She fled the flat, her mind a storm. His words echoed relentlessly. You were there. I'll never forget the look in your eyes. Could it be true? Had her silence not been chosen, but imposed? A survival instinct burying the unbearable? Back in her flat, Bella opened her notebooks from childhood. Page after page of scribbled words, unfinished sentences, jagged drawings. One page caught her eye. A dark sketch of a figure on the floor, red lines scrawled around the head. Above it, a single word, sorry. Her breath caught. She didn't remember drawing it. The room seemed to tilt around her. Daniel noticed her unraveling. You're torturing yourself, he said one night as she pored over the notebooks. I need to know, Bella whispered, clutching the page. What if Adam's right? What if I was part of it? Daniel took her hands gently. You were a child, Bella. Even if you were there, even if you touched that moment, none of it was your fault. Tears spilled down her cheeks. But what if the silence I've built my life on was never just about them, but about me? Daniel pulled her close. Then maybe it's time to forgive yourself, even for what you can't fully remember. The anonymous letters continued. A second one arrived a week later. You're close now, but truth always cuts deeper than you think.
No signature.
Same jagged hand. Bella stared at it, her chest hollow. Someone out there knew more than she did. Someone was watching her struggle toward the truth and pushing her further into the darkness. She turned back to Laura one last time. Meeting at a cafe, Bella slid the letter across the table. Who is sending these? What aren't you telling me? Laura's face drained of color. She read the words quickly, then pushed it back. I don't know, but Bella, stop digging. Please, let the past stay buried. Bella's voice trembled. Why? Because you're hiding something? Because I am. Laura's eyes filled with tears. Because some truths destroy, not heal. And once they're out, you can't take them back. She stood abruptly, leaving her coffee untouched. Bella sat frozen, the weight of her mother's words pressing down like a verdict. That night, the silence was unbearable. She lay awake, staring at the ceiling, the rabbit clutched in her arms. For years, silence had been her prison. Now it was a riddle, one that seemed to hold the key to everything she was, and everything she feared becoming. And for the first time, she wondered if breaking it completely would not set her free, but destroy her. The questions clawed at Bella until she could no longer breathe beneath them. Had she been there that night? Had she lifted something in her small hands, lashed out, struck? Was her silence not only survival, but guilt? The weight of it pressed on her chest like a stone. Daniel urged her to see a therapist, not just for coping, but for digging. If you're haunted by fragments, maybe it's time to face them in a safe place. Memory work, trauma work.
Bella hesitated.
She'd always avoided therapy beyond the basics, afraid of what might surface. But now, fear of not knowing outweighed fear of knowing. She found a specialist in trauma memory, Dr. Reeve, a calm woman with kind eyes and a voice like steady water. On the first session, Bella confessed, I'm terrified of what I'll find. What if I uncover something I can't live with? Dr. Reeve replied gently, Truth doesn't appear to destroy you, Bella. It appears to set you free, even when it hurts. The sessions began slowly. Breathing exercises, grounding, building a safe mental space. Bella thought it all foolish at first, but gradually she saw the purpose, anchoring herself before she ventured into the storm. When she was ready, they used guided recall. Bella closed her eyes, Dr. Reeve's voice leading her back into the house of her childhood. The night of shouting, the crash of breaking glass. Her hands trembled, her breath quickened. What do you see? Dr. Reeve asked softly.
I'm upstairs.
I hear them downstairs.
I'm afraid.
Do you go down? Silence. Bella's chest clenched. Yes, I go down the stairs. Her throat closed. Tears leaked through her shut eyelids. What do you see, Bella? Her lips parted, a whisper escaping. Blood. She jolted awake from the trance, sobbing. Dr. Reeve placed a gentle hand near hers but did not touch. It's okay. That's enough for today. But the image lingered. Blood on the floor, a shadow on the ground. and her own small feet inches away. The next session went deeper. Bella entered the memory again, heart pounding. "Who is there with you?" Dr. Reeve asked. "My mum, Adam." Her voice cracked. "And someone else." The room seemed to spin. She gasped for air. "There was someone else." Dr. Reeve's voice stayed calm. "Who, Bella?" "I don't know. I can't see their face." But they were there, watching. Her eyes flew open. Her pulse raced. Someone else. A presence she had buried in silence all these years. The revelation shook her. She told Daniel, her voice quivering. "There was another person that night. I felt it. Saw it." Daniel frowned. Who could it have been? A neighbor? A friend? Someone who came to the house? Bella shook her head. "I don't know, but I know I wasn't alone with them. That changes everything." Daniel pulled her close. "Then you keep digging until you find who." Another anonymous letter arrived days later. "Memories lie, but evidence doesn't. Look where they told you not to look." Bella read it 3 times, her hands trembling. She thought of Harris's words about buried records, of Laura's desperate plea to stop digging. There was more, somewhere. She visited the archives again, requesting police evidence logs from the trial. Most were sealed or destroyed, but a sympathetic clerk slipped her a photocopy of the index. At the bottom, a strange note caught her eye. Item 47. Fragment of fabric, unidentified. She had never seen it referenced in testimony. It had been collected, logged, and then erased from the story. Bella brought the index to Dr. Reeve. "This fabric, it's haunting me. What if it belonged to the person I saw?" Dr. Reeve nodded slowly. "Memory can blur faces, but sometimes the smallest detail, a color, a sound, is what stays. Does the word fabric bring anything back?" Bella closed her eyes, forcing herself into the memory again. The shouting, the crash, blood, and then a glimpse, a sleeve brushing past her. Dark fabric, rough texture, not Laura's, not Adam's. She gasped, eyes flying open. There was someone else. I wasn't imagining it. I saw them. The knowledge both terrified and steadied her. For years, her silence had been an island. Now it was a map, leading her toward truths buried not just by fear, but by design. The question was, who had worked so hard to keep that fragment hidden? That night, she returned home exhausted. She opened her shoebox, pulled out the anonymous letters, the childhood drawing, the rabbit. Laying them side by side, she whispered, "I was there, but I wasn't alone. I've never been alone in this." Her hands shook, but her voice was firm. For the first time, she felt that breaking the silence might not destroy her. It might destroy someone else. The index sheet burned in Bella's pocket as she left the archive. Item 47. Fragment of fabric, unidentified. It wasn't in the court transcripts. It wasn't in the trial evidence list she had read before. Someone had deliberately scrubbed it from the official story. But why? That night, Bella couldn't sleep. She lay awake, her mind circling. Dark fabric, rough texture, brushing past her as she stood frozen in the hallway. Someone else had been there, and they had left something behind. The letter's words echoed, "Memories lie, but evidence doesn't. Look where they told you not to look." She had to find it. The next morning, she returned to the records office. The clerk who had slipped her the index before raised a wary eyebrow. "You again?" Bella leaned in, desperation in her eyes. "Please, that fabric? Item 47. Do you know what happened to it?" The clerk hesitated, glancing around. Then he lowered his voice. "Most of the minor items went missing when the evidence room was cleared out years ago. But sometimes things get signed out. By officers, for training or reports." "Can I see the log?" Bella asked. He hesitated, then sighed. 5 minutes. That's all." The logbook was thick. The ink faded. Bella ran her finger down the entries until she froze. Item 47. Signed out. 1999. Officer Harris. Her breath caught. Detective Harris, the very man who had warned her of inconsistencies. She returned to see him, the logbook copy folded in her hand. Harris sat in his quiet cottage, the kettle steaming behind him. When she laid the copy on the table, his face tightened. "You kept it," Bella whispered. Harris rubbed his temples. "I signed it out, yes, but not for training. I kept it because I didn't trust the story they built. I thought one day, maybe, it would matter." "Do you still have it?" Bella asked, her heart thudding. Harris stood slowly, disappearing into the back room. When he returned, he held a small evidence bag yellowed with age. Inside lay a scrap of dark fabric, coarse and frayed. Bella's chest constricted. The sight jolted her memory, that brush against her skin, the shadow in the hallway. "Where was this found?" she whispered. Harris's voice was grim. "By the back door," as if someone had slipped in or out. Bella studied the fabric, her breath shaky. It wasn't from Adam's clothes. It wasn't from Laura's. She traced the weave with her eyes, and suddenly a flicker of memory struck her. Sitting at the kitchen table, a visitor in a dark coat. Someone who had come around more than once, always in hushed conversations with her mum. She gasped. "It wasn't a stranger. I knew them. Back home." She tore through her childhood notebooks again. Amid doodles and half-sentences, one page stopped her cold. A stick figure with a scribbled black square on its chest. Above it, written shakily in a child's hand, "The man in the coat." Her pulse roared in her ears. She hadn't drawn Adam. She hadn't drawn Laura. She had drawn someone else. The next therapy session with Dr. Reeve cut deeper than ever. "Go back to the hallway," Reeve guided. "What do you see?" Bella's breathing quickened. Blood, shouting, and her voice broke. Tears streaked down her face. "There's a man. By the door. He's leaving. Dark coat. I see his hands, red. There's blood on his hands." Her whole body convulsed with sobs. Dr. Reeve steadied her voice. "You're safe, Bella. You're remembering. That's all." But Bella felt anything but safe. Because the man she glimpsed wasn't Adam. Wasn't Laura. And the face that flickered at the edge of memory, it was familiar. For days, Bella tried to place it. The jawline, the hair, the way he stood. She dug through old photos, yearbooks, neighborhood archives. Nothing matched. Then one evening, Casey mentioned a name she hadn't heard in years. "Do you remember your mum's friend Martin? He used to come round sometimes after Adam was gone." The name cracked something open. Martin, the man in the coat. Bella's chest tightened. She remembered him now, tall, gruff, always watching her too closely. Driven by dread, she searched for him. It didn't take long. Martin had lived in the same county for decades, moving between odd jobs, sometimes vanishing for months. She found a photo in a local news article, a community meeting about redevelopment. There he was, older now but unmistakable. Bella's stomach lurched. The coat might be gone, the years etched into his face, but it was him. The man in her memory, the shadow at the door. That night, another letter slid under her door. "Now you see him, but do you see why?" Bella stared at the jagged words, her whole body trembling. Whoever was sending the letters knew she had found Martin. But what did why mean? She sat in the dark, the evidence bag before her, the rabbit by her side. For years, she thought her silence had hidden her mother's guilt or her own. But now, she understood. Her silence had hidden his. The man in the coat, Martin. And if he had been there, if his hands had been red, then the story of that night, the story that had defined her whole life, was about to unravel completely. The name Martin echoed in Bella's chest like a drumbeat. She couldn't believe she had forgotten him, or rather, buried him. He had been there in her home in the shadows, and now he stood at the center of the truth she had spent her life circling. She began with cautious searches. Local records confirmed he still lived nearby, in a rundown bungalow on the edge of town. One evening, she drove past. The garden was overgrown, weeds curling through the fence, curtains drawn. A single dim light glowed in the living room. Her heart hammered as she sat in the car, gripping the wheel. This was the man in her memory, the man with blood on his hands. But what could she do? Knock on the door? Confront him? Ask if he remembered shattering her childhood? She drove away trembling. The next therapy session, she confessed her fear. I found him, she whispered. I saw his house, but I couldn't go in. Dr. Reeve leaned forward. You don't need to rush confrontation. Sometimes, seeking understanding is more powerful than direct confrontation. But the letters, Bella said, her voice raw. Someone is pushing me toward him. Whoever they are, they want me to see him. Why? Reeve's eyes softened. Maybe because only he can confirm what your silence has hidden. The letters didn't stop. Another came within days. He isn't who you think. Ask your mother why he was there. Bella's stomach twisted. Her mother. She went to Laura's flat unannounced. Laura looked weary. The bitterness etched deeper than ever. Bella slammed the letter onto the table. Why was Martin in our house that night? Laura froze. Her face drained of color.
Martin Bella Prest.
I saw him. He was there. Why? Laura's lips trembled. For a long moment, silence filled the room, thick and suffocating. Then Laura whispered, because I called him. Bella's breath caught. You what? I was afraid of Adam, Laura said, her voice breaking. He had been getting worse. I needed someone on my side. Martin. He was the only one who listened. I asked him to come that night in case things got bad. Bella's chest tightened. And they did. Laura nodded, tears spilling now. But I never knew he'd. Her voice cracked, and she turned away. Bella left in a haze. Her mother had summoned Martin. He hadn't been a bystander. He had been part of it, maybe the catalyst. But why had Laura never revealed this? Why let the trial focus only on her and Adam? The answer was as terrifying as it was clear: to protect Martin. Bella returned to Martin Street a week later, her pulse unsteady. This time she forced herself to knock. The door creaked open. Martin stood before her, older, stooped, his eyes dull but sharp enough to recognize her instantly. Bella, he said, his voice gravelly. I wondered when you'd come. Her stomach dropped. So it was you. He smiled faintly, not kindly. Depends what you mean. Inside, the air smelled of stale beer and dust. Martin lowered himself into a chair, gesturing for her to sit. You remember, don't you? He asked softly. I remember enough, Bella said, her voice trembling. You were there. You had blood on your hands. Martin chuckled dryly. Children's eyes see strange things. Blood looks like everything in the dark. Her fists clenched. Don't patronize me. You were there because my mother asked you. She told me. At that, Martin's expression hardened. Then she's told you half the story. Bella's breath hitched. What's the other half? Martin leaned closer, his eyes glinting. Your mother didn't just call me for protection. She called me because she knew what was coming. She wanted someone to make sure Adam didn't walk out of that house alive. The words slammed into her like a blow. No, Bella whispered. That's not true. Martin leaned back, lighting a cigarette with trembling fingers. Believe what you like, but I was there because she wanted me there. And when things got bloody, I did what she couldn't. Bella stumbled out of the bungalow, her head spinning. Could it be true? Had Laura orchestrated Adam's death? Not in a moment of self-defense, but with intention, with help? The silence of her childhood now seemed less like accident and more like design. That night, another letter slid under her door. The truth isn't who swung, it's who asked. Bella stared at the jagged words, her heart pounding. She thought of Laura, tears on her face, begging her to stop digging. She thought of Martin, smoke curling in the dim light, claiming to be her mother's weapon. The question was no longer who had blood on their hands. It was why. Martin's words haunted her. She wanted someone to make sure Adam didn't walk out of that house alive. It echoed louder than the shouting of her childhood, louder than her mother's pleas for silence. Bella could not shake the image. Her mother, not as the victim, not even as the accused, but as the orchestrator. She went back through the trial records again, searching for signs of Martin. His name never appeared. No witness list, no mention, nothing. But in the margins of one early police report, she spotted a faint note. Interviewed L, friend present? Not followed. Her stomach dropped. Someone had flagged a friend's presence. But the lead was never pursued. Suppressed. Buried. Bella confronted her mother again. Laura sat stiffly on the couch, her hands twisting in her lap. Why didn't you tell the court Martin was there? Bella demanded. Laura's eyes filled with panic. Because they wouldn't have understood. Understood what? That you brought him in to protect you? Or that you wanted him to kill Adam? Laura flinched as if struck. I never asked him to do that. But he says you did, Bella shot back. He says you wanted Adam dead, and he just finished the job. Laura's voice cracked. Do you think I wanted you to see what you saw? To live with that silence? Bella's voice broke too. You left me to carry it anyway. The silence that followed was worse than shouting. Finally, Laura whispered, Martin was supposed to scare him, that's all. I never wanted it to go that far. But Bella didn't know if she believed her. She started digging into Martin's past. Old news archives, property records, scraps of gossip in the community. What she found chilled her. Martin had lived just streets away from them in the 1990s. He'd been in trouble for assault before. Charges dropped mysteriously. He was rumored to have worked off the books for people who wanted problems solved quietly. A man on the margins, violent when needed, protected when useful. The kind of man you call when fear outweighs trust in the system. She pressed Harris for more. Why wasn't Martin ever in the files? She demanded. Harris hesitated. Because the Crown wanted a clean case. They had a battered woman, a violent man, a clear narrative. Martin complicated everything. And someone, higher up, told me to drop it. Bella stared at him, betrayal hot in her chest. So they covered it up. Harris sighed. They buried what didn't fit. That's what justice looks like sometimes. Neat, palatable, not messy truth. The next therapy session nearly broke her. I don't know what's real anymore, Bella sobbed. Was my mother a victim? A murderer? Both? And what about me? My silence has been part of this cover-up too. Dr. Reeves' voice was steady. Your silence was survival, Bella. But now it's becoming voice. That's not complicity, that's transformation. But Bella shook her head. What if speaking destroys her? Destroys me? Reeve met her gaze. Then maybe destruction is what's needed for something new to rise. Another letter came. You're circling the fire. But will you step in? Or keep watching from the smoke? The words made her skin crawl. Whoever was sending them wasn't just an observer. They wanted her to burn. Driven by desperation, Bella arranged another meeting with Martin. This time, she recorded it. Tell me what really happened that night, she demanded. Martin leaned back, amused. You already know. She called me. I came. Things got violent. He went down. And me. Bella pressed. What did I do? Martin's eyes gleamed. You screamed. You froze. Then you ran. You didn't touch him. That blood wasn't yours to carry. The words left her dizzy with relief. And yet, dread. Because he shifted the burden fully onto Laura. When she told Laura what Martin said, her mother broke. Tears poured down her face. I wanted you safe. I wanted Adam gone. But I never wanted Martin to. I never wanted you to see. She collapsed into sobs. Bella watched, torn between fury and pity. For the first time, she saw her mother not as the enemy of her silence, but as another prisoner of it. That night, Bella sat with her shoebox open. The rabbit, the letters, the childhood drawing of the man in the coat. For decades, silence had been her inheritance. Now, the truth was clawing its way to the surface, jagged and unstoppable. The trial had been a story, neat, digestible, but the real story was uglier, messier, and it had been waiting for her all along. The weight of it all pressed down like a storm cloud. Martin's claim that Laura wanted Adam gone. Laura's broken denials. The court's deliberate silence. And the letters still arriving, each one pulling her closer to the fire. She sat with Daniel late one night, The letters spread across the table. What if I go public?
Bella whispered.
What if I tell the truth about Martin, about the cover-up? About everything? Daniel studied her. It would tear open old wounds. It would drag your mother through hell again. But it might finally set you free. Bella pressed her face into her hands. But what if it destroys me instead? Daniel took her hand, firm. Maybe destruction is the only way to build something new. The next morning, she found another letter. You've circled long enough. Meet me where it ended. Midnight. Come alone. Her blood ran cold. The handwriting was the same jagged script. But this time it wasn't just a taunt. It was an invitation. She went. The old house stood in ruin, the garden wild, the windows boarded. Her childhood home, the scene of it all. At midnight, she pushed through the broken gate, her breath clouding in the chill. Hello? She whispered. From the shadows, a figure emerged. Her chest clenched. It wasn't Martin. It wasn't her mother. It was Harris. You, Bella gasped. It was you writing the letters. The old detective's eyes were tired, but fierce. I had to push you. You'd never have gone far enough otherwise. Rage and betrayal flared in her chest. You manipulated me. You made me think. I made you see. Harris cut in. The system failed you. Failed your mother. Failed Adam too. They wanted a neat story, so they buried the rest. But you needed the truth. And I wasn't going to let you live another decade in silence. Bella's voice shook. Why now? Why me? Harris looked at her for a long moment. Because silence rots. And you were the only one who could break it. They stood in the ruined hallway. Bella felt the weight of memory pressing from every corner. This doesn't give me peace, she whispered. It just gives me more pain. Truth often does, Harris said softly. But pain can be carried. Lies can't. He handed her something. A folder, worn and yellowed. Inside, photos from the night. Bloodstains. The fabric scrap. Notes about Martin, notes deliberately cut from the official file. Bella's throat closed. You kept it all. I couldn't burn it, Harris said. I hoped one day someone would demand it. You did. The days after blurred. Bella wrestled with the choice before her. Expose the truth, destroy Laura. Reopen wounds. Unleash chaos. Keep silent, protect her mother. Protect herself. But live in the lie forever. She met Laura again, holding the folder in her hands. Tell me the truth, Bella begged. Did you want him dead? Laura wept. I wanted him gone. I wanted to be free. But I didn't mean for it to happen that way.
Bella stared, aching.
That's not an answer. Laura's voice broke. Because there isn't one. I was desperate. I was drowning. I called Martin and I let him in. That's all I'll ever know how to say. That night, Bella wrote in her notebook for the first time in years. She wrote not in fragments, but in sentences. Silence is a witness too. Speaks even when you bury it. And mine has spoken long enough. She decided. She contacted a journalist. One who had chased the case years ago, still hungry for truth. She handed over the folder, the letters, the memories. Tell it all, Bella said. Even if it ruins us. The journalist's eyes widened. This will shake everything.
Bella nodded.
Good. Let it. When the article broke, the storm came fast. Headlines screamed. New revelations in old case. Police cover-up. Silenced witnesses. Hidden figure named. Reporters hounded Laura. Martin vanished. Harris refused comment. And Bella. Bella stood at the center, trembling, exposed, but unflinching. Daniel held her as the chaos unfolded. You did it, he whispered. I destroyed everything, Bella said. No, Daniel murmured. You destroyed the silence. That's different. Another letter arrived, slipped under her door. But this one was different. Neater, gentle. It's done. The silence is broken. Rest now.
No signature.
She didn't need one. The headlines eventually faded, but the cracks they left remained. Laura became a ghost in her own neighborhood. Some saw her as victim, others as conspirator. most simply avoided her. Martin disappeared altogether, melting into the shadows he'd always lived in. Whether he fled town or simply crawled deeper into the margins, Bella didn't know, and perhaps never would. And Harris? Retired, silent, unrepentant. When questioned by the press, he only said, "The truth matters, even late." For Bella, the storm settled into something quieter. She walked through her days with a strange lightness, even as grief still pressed on her chest. For the first time, she wasn't carrying a secret. Her silence had been shattered, scattered into the open. It didn't make her whole, but it made her real. She visited her mother one last time. Laura sat at the window, the curtains drawn, her face pale. "You shouldn't have told them," Laura said softly. "I had to," Bella whispered. Laura turned, eyes red but steady. "And now everyone sees me as a monster." Bella swallowed hard. "Maybe, or maybe they finally see you as human." Tears welled in Laura's eyes. For the first time in years, she didn't look bitter. She looked tired. "I don't know if I can forgive you," she said. Bella's voice trembled. "I don't know if I can forgive you either, but at least we're not lying anymore." Laura nodded, silent tears slipping down her cheeks. That was all. Back home, Bella opened the shoebox one final time. The rabbit, the drawing, the letters. She didn't burn them. She didn't hide them. She placed them in a wooden box and slid it onto a shelf. Not as chains, but as history. They were no longer secrets. They were artifacts. Weeks later, Bella walked with Daniel along the shoreline. The air was crisp, the sea restless. "Do you regret it?" Daniel asked gently. Bella thought for a long moment. "I regret the years I lost," she said. "I regret the silence, but not breaking it, never breaking it." Daniel squeezed her hand. For the first time, she felt that the weight wasn't hers alone anymore. Her therapy sessions with Dr. Reeve shifted. They no longer focused on digging up memory, but on building future. "What do you want your life to look like now?" Reeve asked. Bella smiled faintly. "Messy, honest, loud." Reeve chuckled. "That sounds like living." One evening, Bella returned to the ruined house. The boards still clung to the windows, weeds clawed at the walls. She stood in the hallway where the shouting had once echoed, where her silence had been born. She closed her eyes, inhaled deeply, and whispered aloud, "I was there. I saw it. And I survived it." The words filled the hollow space like a prayer. For the first time, she felt not trapped in that house, but freed from it. The letters stopped coming. She never heard from Harris again. Martin remained a shadow. Laura drifted further into solitude. But Bella began writing. Not fragments, not silence. Stories, truths, a voice that was finally hers. In the end, the silence hadn't destroyed her. It had shaped her, tested her. And when she finally broke it, it became the very thing that gave her back her life.